I call to order a meeting of the Finance Committee for Wednesday, April 3, 2024. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone here. Couple initial announcements. Same announcements I make every time. Please try to silence your cell phones. And this meeting is being broadcast by SMAC and recorded for future viewing, entertainment, and enjoyment on the internet. And with that, we will start this up looking for a motion.
Wait a minute. I'll make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Second.
Laura 1.
Motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Public hearing is now open. We are having a public hearing for a special town meeting article. It is Article 1 on the upcoming special town meeting. Do we have a presentation here?
Excuse me, Juan.
Yes, Mr. Lurie.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. There was a document that was sent. It was the meeting Article 1 information, and there's a final budget called Total Project Budget Schematic Design submitted to the MSBA, and then there's a model that was put in to show what the cost per household is. I just wanted, before we got deep into the meeting, to just get two pieces of information that support how that model was created. I just want to get this out of the way so that it's kind of understood, because it's important to kind of have the context of that before we get deep into the.
Is it part of their presentation?
I'm hoping it'll be covered.
I just wanted to get this understood before we got started.
I'm hoping that that will be covered during the presentation.
Could we ask if it will be? I want to know.
Said yes.
Will that be covered during the presentation?
Well, I'm going to be asking
I'm going to ask them right now.
what the term, I want to know the term and the interest rate.
When we get to that point of the presentation, we will
Will they
ask
be
that.
able to address that?
I certainly hope they will. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Lurie. Would you like to present? Mr. Recupero?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the previous speaker, we will address that
Mike,
later.
make sure it's green and make sure it's close to you.
Yes, it's important for everyone here to make sure your mic is on when you're speaking so the people at home can hear you and the people in the audience. Thank you very much.
I promise it was green when I started, but
In the committee, we'd like the committee to hear.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to your committee. Just for the previous speaker, we will be addressing that later in the presentation. Here at the table with us tonight, Tim Bonfatti from Vertex, the owner's project manager. Of course, you know Dr. Baeta, superintendent of schools. To my left is Catherine Weiss, chair of the school committee. And over there, manning the presentation and giving a large portion of it, is Carl Franceschi, of Drummond, Roseanne and Anderson, DRA, the architect for the project. I didn't know it bent. Shorter people need to know such things, you know, so. Thank you for that. So I'm going to breeze through the preliminaries of it so we can get into the substance of the presentation. Briefly, on behalf of the School Building Committee, we're here tonight to present to you our recommended project for a new elementary school. We are here because town meeting charged the School Building Committee with an appropriation in 2001, I think it was, to do a feasibility study under the Mass School Building Association regulations, which we have done. We have studied a number of options, including addition renovation. This is all tying back to, and we came up with a new construction project, which you'll all which you'll hear about soon. This is all tied into what was initially, back in 2010, an assessment of need based on a facilities master plan saying that the South School needed to be addressed, which people here at the table and in the room can tell you about much better than I can. But so we went out and our task was to, through the course of about a year, study all options on how we best address that need at the meeting Stoughton's education needs, facilities needs in the most cost-effective way. Also, I want to make that that point abundantly clear because, of course, we're here in front of the Finance Committee. You'll hear in the speakers after me the process to get from point A to point Z, all the things that went into that decision, where we go from here, and, of course, a breakdown to what this is going to cost the town of Stoughton and the individual taxpayers, which we'll address. If I can, very briefly, back one slide quickly. So I won't spend too much time on this. As I said, the facilities master plan dates back to 2010. It was then updated in 2017. We built a high school in between. There was a choice at the time with MSBA on whether we would do the South School or the high school first. MSBA came out, toured both buildings. We had statements of interest in for both. It was decided at that time by the town, I think, and MSBA jointly that the high school was a project that would get us the most bang for our buck, serves the most students. And that project, as you know, went forward, and I humbly say came out very successfully. That facilities master plan was updated very recently, 2023, I think. Dr. Baeta can tell you more about that. But at that, why don't we get into the substance of our project and specifically the timeline with Tim Bonfatti.
Thanks, TJ. So I'm Tim Bonfatti from Vertex. We're the owner's project manager on the elementary school project. We were the owner's project manager on the high school. So as TJ mentioned, the MSBA, in looking at Stoughton's statement of interest and application, invited Stoughton to come in to study two scenarios when they made the decision to invite them into the feasibility study. The first scenario was a replacement of the South School, a 200, and I'm trying to recall, but it was a 225 or 230 person school. And then they also offered them the option to study a 515 person consolidated school, which would consolidate the South and the Wilkins School. That's feasibility study and commenced with basically with the start of DRA's participation. We were hired a little earlier in December of 2022. And the decision in terms of that was made to look at what was the right decision, because not only were we going to have to pick a new school, and whether it was an addition renovation or a new school, we would have to pick an enrollment option, was to focus the building committee on the decision around the building type, add reno or new, and of course it's a school committee decision whether or not Stoughton would go from 5 to 4 elementary schools. So that process, as you can see from the timeline during feasibility, commenced with a number of community forums. There was kind of that dual track happening, and several school committee meetings that were held on the matter of consolidation. The decision was made by the school committee in July of 2023 to move forward with the consolidated school option. At the same time, the building committee, and Carl will deal more with this, made the decision to move forward with the preferred schematic that you'll see today in terms of the building. So we then went through the schematic design process, which is essentially basically brings the project to roughly 30% of the design process. It allows us to get an accurate budget. It allows us to get an accurate schedule. We make decisions, obviously finalize the scope and what it will entail. And that basically is what had happened from September or so until February, when we received the estimates for the school that you're going to see tonight. So that is what is now being presented to has been presented to the MSBA. They have approved the project. It is moving forward and will be included on their board docket for April 24th and will be voted approved from every indication we understand. And so this is the same process, by the way, it's the process the MSBA prescribes, but it's also the process, of course, we followed with the high school project. So what we are in now is the process of the community forums that we have hosted already and have some scheduled to host. And the project is scheduled to be, in order for the project to be approved by, finally approved by the MSBA, it obviously needs to be approved by the town, and that is happening at the town meeting in May and at a debt exclusion ballot initiative in June. So that's kind of the upcoming process. The process will conclude with a new school if it's successful. The design phase will take us through 2025 into the fall of 2025, and we anticipate starting construction, actually into the summer of 2025, and we anticipate starting construction then. And with that, I will turn it over to Carl. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Baeta.
Good evening, folks. The PowerPoint that's up there, you can all read, so I'm not going to go line by line. But the fact of the matter is that the decision was made back in 2010 that this building would only see health and safety issues going forth, and that going after any type of other significant repair wasn't in the life of this building. Specifically, just today, I went back and actually reread the MSBA's grading of this building at 2010, which was the lowest at that time, and it continues to be the lowest rating. In other words, it's a school that the MSBA would not consider for accelerated repair like we've done at other elementary schools with windows and roofs and boilers, et cetera. So just keep that in mind as part of what the buildings are needs. And as you can see from everything from the size of the building, with the largest increase in enrollment that we currently have, we're at 312 students at the South School, a school that typically would see around 275 kids. 273, 280, and continues to increase with the changes that are taking place in that part of town, to be quite honest. But we also have issues around student privacy, student access that have been a continuous problem, no dedicated space to the kindergarten areas, and of course, one of our biggest issues, which is a growing need of specialized programming within the district. Building safety in terms of, doors are locked and so on and so forth are taking place, but as you know, this particular school has not had some of those upgrades that you see typically that take place over generations within our buildings, including, for example, articles that we've put forth with you. Some have been passed around vestibules, and all of that have not been done at this school. Again, based upon a decision back in 2010 that we would only be looking at the life expectancy of this building and safety issues, and not moving forward with new roofs and windows, et cetera, like we've done at the other elementary schools. One of the biggest issues that we have now is also everything to do with electricity and the power that is needed within these buildings, as you know, which is always a concern. And as someone who recently, as of last week, was there, we also have some significant issues going on with our parking lot area. As you know, that's a very small parking lot area, but now on both the left side and the right side of the building, we have significant damage that's being done because of a lot of still water, if you will, that gets underneath and causes all the paving to come up and so on. And we just had recently a trash pickup that ended up with creating all kinds of holes on the left side of the building, which then required us to take for further parking. So in general, when you look at this list and a significant longer list that's available, we want to think about access to student outcomes. That means the ability for students to get into the building, the ability for students to be in an environment that provides them 21st century skill development, and a building that has access to the community as well. Next slide.
Mr. Benfatti has already mentioned the decision to consolidate from 5 to 4 elementary schools, with the South and the Wilkins chosen as the buildings for repurposing due to their age and their undersized classroom and facilities and lack of facilities for specialized programs. Rather than bus Wilkins students over to the south, we would redraw district lines in consideration of the town's demographics, needs, and resources with input from the stakeholders. We need to redistrict regardless of what happens with this project due to overcrowding. A new consolidated building would allow for more flexibility to accommodate future population bubbles. In addition, dedicated classrooms in the new school and space freed up at other buildings would allow the district to better serve the needs of our growing special ed population, reducing the number of students sent out of district, which does have financial benefits, and we would be able to maintain an appropriate number of general education classrooms for our expanding overall enrollment. In combination with ongoing improvements to existing school buildings, the new building and subsequently redistricting would mean more equitable and accessible facilities that better fit Stoughton's vision for elementary education for all of Stoughton's elementary school students. The consolidated building would also more efficiently use resources and personnel. For example, it would reduce the number of specials, which are the art, music, gym teachers, who have to commute between various buildings, and it would allow us to equip only one gym, only one library, rather than 2 different gyms, libraries, and so on.
So I'll take it from there. Carl Franceschi with DRA. This project began, like all school projects, with a focus on the educational plan. In other words, before we design anything, we want to understand how Stoughton wants teaching and learning to happen, not just in the new school, but in all the elementary schools. And on the screen are some of the highlights of what was a very robust and specialized education plan, written especially for Stoughton and was commended by the school building authority, by the way. A couple of the highlights there, and you'll see this sort of manifest in the design, the notion that this is a K through 5, grade K through 5 school, that there was a desire to separate the younger children from the older children in the building physically, to have sort of an upper and lower school. To utilize the outdoor spaces as much as possible. We learned a lot during COVID that a lot of teaching and learning can happen outdoors and be part of the education and the curriculum, and the plan wanted to see that in a new and or renovated project. It was also recognized that this building should serve more than just the south neighborhoods and community. It should be for the entire Stoughton community as much as possible, and we'll point out some of those features too. And have a few other specialized spaces, in particular the last line there about the learning commons, which is kind of the modern evolution of a library, should be the heart of the building. And we'll show you how that has sort of manifested too. As was mentioned, we did, as required by the MSBA, study a pretty broad spectrum of options here. Everything from addition renovation on the existing South School site to 3 different configurations of new construction on the so-called line lumber site. In the end, the option that made the most sense, that satisfied the education plan best, and had sort of the best long-range value for the school, and in collaboration with the school committee selecting the enrollment option, was the so-called pinwheel plan in this chart here labeled NC1. New construction, number 1 there, on the line lumber site, which is, it's a parcel of land off of Park Street, just north of the existing South School. You can sort of see it here in this aerial. It's a little bit remote, but the South School is here. There is some private property in between, but the town acquired this parcel of land back in the 1960s for school purposes. Although it's never, been developed. It's basically a wooded site. It has some trails on it, and it does have frontage on Park Street. The larger site plan here shows how the proposed school would be laid out with access from Park Street over some existing wetlands there. So there is a bridge there, and we've already started working with the Conservation Commission on getting that reviewed and approved by them. And one of the advantages of this site over the existing South School is the improvement to the vehicular circulation on the site. We can create a separate parent drop-off loop and substantial parking area there, a separate bus loop, and a separate fire lane, which can double as a kindergarten drop-off too. So in each of these have, fairly significant driveways, which allow, a large queue of cars to stack off of the public streets. Because there's just this single primary entrance into the site, The proposal also includes this emergency driveway to the adjacent residential street, Haynes Road, just north of the site. But to be clear, that is only for emergency purposes. It could be used for pedestrian and bicycle access to the site from that neighborhood, but not for day-to-day vehicular access. But it's certainly prudent to have, two ways in and out of an elementary school site. Here's a little enlargement of the site plan, and you can see some of those principles we talked about. One of the reasons this plan was favored by having these dedicated wings to the building, it sort of encloses and defines outdoor spaces on each side of the building, including the main entrance side adjacent to the parking areas, a dedicated kindergarten playground for younger children, a playground for older children, a hard surface play area right off of the cafeteria for recess play, outdoor classroom as well off of one of the wings, and so forth. And so that's one of the particular advantages of this layout, and I'll show you in the floor plan in a moment too. But also wanted to point out some of the community features here. The soccer field will be developed as a sort of official under age 12 soccer field and be available to the community. And the paved areas, the athletic sports courts are basketball and pickleball here, which can be used both obviously by the elementary school but also by the community. They're located adjacent to parking, so they can be used, after school hours and weekends and summers and so forth. The building too, one of the goals is for it to be a very sustainable building, and not just a basic LEED certified building, but a LEED silver building, perhaps even LEED gold like the high school is, although it will be at least LEED silver. And one of the improvements to the reimbursement formulas at the state level is that can gain the town 4 additional reimbursement points, which is significant in a project of this size. That's increases their grant significantly. And it will be things such as it'll be an all-electric building, not without fossil fuels. It will be partially heated and cooled by ground source geothermal wells. Again, very renewable energy source, and many other kind of environmental and energy efficiency measures. Here's a rendering of the front of the building, and just to emphasize, there's the main entrance to the school on the right, but there's also a dedicated community entrance to the left, which could be used during the school day, but also after hours. That could be the primary entrance into the cafeteria and gymnasium, when the rest of the school to the right could be closed off. Here's, again, just a reinforcement of how the building satisfies the education plan. These blue areas are classroom wings. Each one of these wings is basically a grade. So there's a kindergarten grade, a kindergarten wing, a first grade, and it's sort of metaphorically, as you rise in the building, you rise in the building, rise in grades rather, you rise in the building. So that on the second floor is second, third grade, on the top floor is fourth and fifth grade. The other wings of the so-called pinwheel, one is the administration wing, the fourth is the assembly areas of the cafeteria and gymnasium, the kind of community aspects of the program. And in the center of it all is that learning commons or library, which is a multi-story space really at the heart of the school. And we can show you some photos and renderings of that in a moment. Here's the floor plans again, 3 floors, which actually helps keep the building a more compact footprint. So we're cutting down fewer trees and using less of the site by having a more compact building, and also allows us to satisfy the education plan by separating the upper and lower schools. And again, just the main entrance is here from the right. Those community aspects of cafeteria and gymnasium are on that wing, and the blue areas are the classroom, so-called classroom neighborhoods in each wing. We do have this video which runs for a couple minutes here, just to give you a 3-dimensional view of what it would look like in the wooded area. We are trying to salvage as many trees as possible and limit the development to, just close to the school within that ring road, and preserve some of the site for future for future use by the town, perhaps not just for expanding the school, but other town uses. So that was thought about. The roof is solar ready. All of those flat areas of the roof and even the low slope areas can potentially have solar panels. We're still trying to resolve exactly which method will be used to acquire those panels, whether the town actually owns them or has a power purchase agreement and so forth. This is entering the front door of the school. This is at Learning Commons, which is the heart of the school. As we mentioned, a multi-story space. And then down to the left of this corridor takes you to the cafeteria and gymnasium. And the gymnasium has a full-size basketball court. So again, it could be used by adults. It could be used by the high school JV team could come over here and practice. It could be Saturday morning, basketball league. The cafeteria doubles as the performance and auditorium space in the school, has a stage at one end, and again is immediately adjacent to the entrance for the community entrance, and at the other end, the glass wall there is out to the recess area, the paved play area. Going up through the commons here, we just point out too the tan-colored structure you see here is actual wood. It will be a wood frame building here in the center, using, again, obviously very natural material, very warm material, and sort of reinforces the notion that this is a school in the woods, quote unquote. Upstairs, there is a maker space associated with that Learning Commons too. And then these are the classroom wings, just a sample. It's not just a straight corridor with lockers on both sides. There are sort of learning areas and alcoves, trying to, make as best use as we can from every square foot of the building. A couple typical classrooms here. You can see in the kindergarten, there's sort of fun window shapes there at the lower level too. There's the night view of it. So thank you for your patience with that. Let me advance and turn it back to Tim.
Thank you, Carl. So this is the project budget for that beautiful school you just saw. So it's, as many of you know, we've experienced significant cost increases in the past couple of years, particularly the last 3 years since COVID, with some of the inflation shocks and not dissimilar to what's happened in consumer pricing. So the pricing is obviously significant in terms of the construction cost, the single largest portion of the budget. So I'll deal with that first, and then I'll talk about some of the other costs. So the $91 million number you see for the construction cost is the product of 2 independent estimates, which is what we do on every project. The MSBA requires it, but it's also good practice to make sure that we have the right number, because this is the number that we now have to finish the design and stay on target with. So that was the reconciled number that we came between the 2 estimators, one hired by us at Vertex and one hired by DRA to come up with the construction cost. The other cost that you see in there is the administration and the OPM fees, and those are both our fees as well as a number of other costs related to permitting and administration costs. And then the architect and engineering fees of the DRA and their many sub-consultants. There is also costs for pre-construction services with this construction manager. And then we also include in the budget all of the necessary testing and utility back charges and things that need to happen in order to have a full project. And we cover, as we did with the high school, a completely new technology package, which is pretty robust these days in most schools, and no difference here. And then we carry contingency and technology and furniture. And then at the bottom, we also include a contingency for future unknowns, particularly change orders, typically change orders, as well as changes that might occur in the soft costs. And those are the 2 contingency numbers. So the grant is the total project budget that has been approved by the MSBA, and we have had feedback from the MSBA, and everything has been approved, and we've gotten some favorable feedback from them reflected in that grant. maximum grant, which aside from the fact that they've significantly increased their reimbursement caps and rates in the last 6 months, they also gave us consideration for some spaces that were out of their guidelines, but given Stoughton's unique educational plan, that resulted in that roughly the grant totaling about 42% of the project costs, which if it happens, and I can talk more about this, but the grant is based on what we submit for costs. It's not based on the budget. It's based on what the actual costs. So that's the maximum grant. That represents pretty close to what the high school was in the end, 42% reimbursed by the state. And then on the tax impact, as you can see, and TJ can talk more about this, this has been sort of an ongoing discussion with the town treasurer's office, but based on an analysis from the 2023 Department of Revenue, the average valuation in Stoughton of a house was $475,000. That resulted in tax impact using certain assumptions around borrowing that were $400 to $410 per household, which represented about a 6% increase based on those figures. And I'll turn it over to TJ, who can talk a little more about the tax impact and the questions that were asked about that.
So as Tim just said, the estimates that we've provided are based on certain assumptions. And we have used rates that are applicable today, which isn't to say that they'll be applicable 6 months from now. But the current borrowing rates in this town, per the town's bond advisor, is 3.25 for a 20-year note and 4% for a 30-year note. This particular model was based on a 30-year note. Just to clarify what this committee, the building committee's role is, we recommend, and we don't recommend as to borrowing packages and financing. As a matter of fact, that's more something that you should recommend one way or the other, because you know how it fits into the town's financial profile far better than we will. What we have to do for MSBA purposes and for, of course, town meeting and your purposes is to give you a solid estimate as to what it will cost the average taxpayer based on the average home value. And just emphasizing average home value and average taxpayer, because of course, not every home is worth $474,000 and change. There are some that are higher and some that are lower. But in this case, we used the numbers that are reported by DOR, publicly available, and the most currently available on DOR's website are FY 2023. Those can be updated as soon as we can get more recent numbers from the town accountant, excuse me. And that doesn't factor in the commercial industrial personal property share, of course. So when we say the cost to the residential taxpayer, we're only considering the 71.6% that's paid by residential taxpayers in town. So based on the assumptions that we were mentioning a second ago, Board of Selectmen has a policy, last time I looked at least, the Board of Selectmen has had a policy over the last several years of a declining tax rate. There's also an annual discussion on the tax split, as Mr. Anastamino and I did several times, all of which will factor into the actual cost of this. So all we can do is give you our best estimate as to whether or not the plan is to borrow at 20 or 30%. We can, excuse me, 20 or 30 years. Jeez, yeah, some knuckle breakers. Some guys guys with batons and 22s coming at us. But all we can do is recommend, but I can tell you that the history for the high school project was somewhat unique and changed mid-course. So initially there was a plan to borrow in tranches. It was, we need a pile of money here, here, and here at these benchmarks in the project. So the town would borrow, I don't even know the amount, but let's say it's $5 million, $10 million to meet the next benchmark. And then sometime in 2018 or 19, Mr. Anastas was the acting town manager at that time, and he consolidated that under one financing package and one improved rate. because that was a big part of it. He went to the bond rating agencies and said, this is the town of Stoughton, this is what we've done to improve ourselves. Can you re-rate us or evaluate our rate? And the town's rate improved. And now we are, I believe, unless it's changed, we're at a AA2. And the rates for, that's by Moody's calculation, I should say, because I have that report from, I want to say like April or May. Based on that, 3.25% for a 20-year and 4% for a 30-year is what we could expect. So to answer your question. So I mean, as to what we'll borrow at, 20 or 30 years, no idea. It's a policy decision beyond the scope of this committee. I can tell you what I'd recommend right now, because I know there are other priorities, and we've just put a model in there that I think is reasonable for discussion of this article, if that answers the question. And by the way, those rates are current as of 2 days ago.
So we've been asked to address the question about what happens if the project doesn't pass its approval votes. Obviously, you know, it goes without saying that the MSBA requires the town to approve it before it would fund a project of any kind. So there's a whole process that would need to be re-engaged with the MSBA were it to be anticipated in the future. The existing buildings, I think, as you've heard, both, but in particular the south building, have significant deferred maintenance that would need to be implemented at the south over the course of whatever years are necessary to do that. The project, in terms of the timeline for whether the project could be reinitiated with the state, that's really a discussion that has to happen on a case-by-case basis with the state. I can tell you from examples in my own hometown that where they did not pass a vote that they've not been able to get back in line for a future project, but that again is something that is based on a discussion on a case-by-case basis with the state. Construction costs are escalating. They're not escalating fortunately at the rate they were 2 years ago, but nobody believes that there isn't going to be an escalation of say 3 to 5% in a typical year for construction costs. When we did an analysis as we were required, this is the fifth bullet there, when we did an analysis as we were required to by the state about what it would take to renovate the 2 K-5 schools, the cost of that basically equaled the cost of in terms of the cost to renovate them, and that would be to make no spatial improvements, simply to renovate them and bring them up to code, would cost the same as the town's share of this one consolidated project. And then, you know, as Catherine had mentioned, the district would need to start redistricting and then look at how they're going to deal with the space issues that are occurring in the other schools, obviously quickly, and understand what that plan B would be. So those are sort of a brief summary of the implication of a no vote.
We'll wrap up here and let you fire away. But first I want to discuss something that I think is important to the majority of the community that don't have kids in the schools, and that is, you know, what's the benefit for me if I don't have a child that's looking for a K-5 education? That's one of the things that I like to focus on quite a bit, because I don't have kids in the school and I don't anticipate I will anytime soon. So it's got to mean more than just a place where we educate 515 students for half the year. And, you know, of course we'll improve the quality of education, not just for this school, but I think you heard Dr. Baeta and Catherine Weiss speak about how this is going to have an impact district-wide on K-5 education, but also just for the rest of us, if I can qualify us all in that rest of us category. But town has put quite a bit of thought into this area of town recently, as you know more than anyone else, because There've been a number of people who've come before your committee for sewer improvements. There's been a number of different traffic schemes, changes to geometry and otherwise that will take this area of town, which I think has been, hasn't had quite a bit of planning over the last 50 years and seems to be an area of growth for this community. And this fits into that plan where you have, I don't want to even estimate it because I did the other night and I was probably off by a goodly amount, but there's a healthy population in the town of Stoughton that lives on the south side here, both on the Sumner Street area and in the Park Street and east of Park Street area. And this would provide a community area where they can recreate using fields, pickleball courts proposed, and a variety of different passive recreation areas because it is a dense woodland right now. I think that's important to the community. Nothing thrills me so more. I don't know, Mr. Wolk, I don't know about you, but every time I drive by the high school, I get a thrill when I see people walking around the track and playing tennis on the tennis courts and recreating on the turf field. And that's a community amenity that we did good work on because I think we put the extra mile on these community amenities and not just the four walls of the building. So, you know, that broader picture is, I think, what we're bringing to you right now. Is it cheap to build? No, nowhere in Massachusetts is it cheap to build. This school will still, by the way, be smaller than the average K-5 school in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts funded by the MSBA. MSBA right now is funding K-5 schools on average about 620 schools. I can be corrected, but I think I'm spot on with that. 600, what did I say, schools? 620 students. We're still smaller than the average MSBA project for a K-5 school. And we can do quite a bit more. I think you heard Carl talk about how we've tried to set aside, tried to design thoughtfully so we can set aside other areas of this parcel for other town priorities. Those are available to the town. This was identified as a school parcel long ago, but the town can do more of it, and this committee didn't want to be hogs about how we design a school to meet the educational needs for a K-5 population. And the last thing I'll say is this is, I think, the way we keep things like our bond rating and things like our affordability. I know this sounds kind of ironic to say, but how we pay for things in this town, capital improvements, it depends on a community improving itself. One of the ways our bond rating increased in the last 5 or so years was because we did the high school, not in spite of it. Of course, all has to fit in, all has to be affordable, without a question. But if we don't improve our schools, and if our schools decline as a result of it, there's a fallout to that. The fallout is property values. You can never say, I've tried 1,000 different ways to say that building a school will improve property values. You just can't. I asked my nerdy economics major nephew if he could run a model on that. You just can't. What you can say is that if schools decline, that certainly will affect property values. Property values will thereafter affect what we take in for tax revenue, and thereafter how you people budget and our bond rating and how we afford projects in the future. So there is a bigger picture. This is making up for 50 years of inactivity on addressing needs of our building. And I think we've done it in a thoughtful way, trying to take, as Catherine said, trying to take advantage of certain economies of scale with a gym that can service two school student populations in one building, and cafeteria, and likewise. I think we did this in a thoughtful way. Our job, I want to emphasize again, is to recommend to town meeting the best solution for the town. We welcome any questions on how we achieve that, and certainly from this committee. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. Do you have any questions? Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim, I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind. The total budget shown on the appropriation is $114,407,877, which that's the amount in the article, that's the amount of the total budget. However, this also includes the feasibility study of $1 million, which has already been funded. In my opinion, and I talked to the chairman and vice chairman about this, I think we should be looking at an appropriation of $113,407,877, unless the MSBA says it has to be this way.
No, the appropriation, that is a replication of the Form 3011, but you're correct. The appropriation could be reduced by the already appropriated.
$1 million.
$1 million.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. And just for a little explanation for those of you who don't understand how the MSBA works, and believe me, you could probably get a graduate degree in how the MSBA works. But in this particular case, if you take a look at the budget information you provided, there's a whole bunch of items called ineligible for reimbursement. So perhaps you could explain in MSBA talk what that means.
So what the MSBA has said from its very beginning is that they will reimburse a percentage, the percentage that town's entitled to of eligible costs. So there are many reasons why a cost is not eligible. They can be categorically not eligible. There's about 20 different categories, like legal fees. They're not categorically eligible for reimbursement. And then there are the big reasons that costs are do not get reimbursed are because of two caps. One is on the construction cost, which, although they've improved that cap significantly, as I mentioned, in the last 6 months, it's still not representative of construction cost, and they realize that. They do that so that they can disperse a larger amount of grants among more communities. And then the second cap is the site cap. They only approve for reimbursement a portion, 10% of the building cap for site. And in the case of most suburban schools, where they have site development and parking and fields, and certainly in the case of this project, which is a greenfield site, that is not sufficient to pay for the site costs. So those are the two big categories. There are caps on other things. There are caps on architect and engineering fees. There are caps on OPM fees. But as I mentioned, there's quite a bit. We do a whole presentation on eligibility.
Okay, if I could follow up on that a little bit. The cap on the construction cost is a cost per square foot that the MSBA dictates.
Yes.
For the high school, that was $299 a square foot. What is it for this school?
I believe it's been increased to $550.
Whoa. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, they made a significant $100+ increase in the fall.
So that,
recognizing because of the inflation that.
But still, that means that we're going to get more money in grant money than we would have gotten if they had gone their usual 3 or 4% per year.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay, thank you, MSBA. Now, I also noticed that the cap on the architect's fees and the caps on the OPM fees in the high school was a percentage of the total construction cost. That apparently has changed, and it is now a total of something else.
It's a total of that cap cost.
Of the cap cost. So by doing that, which is a change from the high school, we actually lose some grant money because it's capped at a lower percentage. Is that
Yes,
correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So the MSBA giveth and the MSBA taketh away.
Yes.
Praise the MSBA. Amen. Thank you. Hallelujah. I also noticed that you used to be able to get an extra reimbursement point if you were using a CM at risk, and that is no longer the case?
That is no longer the case. Right? They took that
Okay.
reimbursement away.
All right. And final question for you, Tim, and I'm not quite sure if I know what the answer is, though. If this project goes forward and an educational foundation contributes money for the project after the fact, will that impact the amount of the MSBA grant?
It really depends on how that foundation, what is the contribution?
The foundation, the Elliott and Joel Foundation provides a $1 million gift to the town of Stoughton. Thank you, Elliott. Okay. Will that impact, I mean, I know what it did 10 years ago, and I'm trying to figure out if...
Yeah, they haven't changed that policy.
So basically what they're saying is, go ahead, you say it.
Well, they haven't changed the policy, so if you were to do that kind of a grant, somebody gave that kind of money, that would be taken away from the grant.
Okay.
But there are ways that
just
towns
love that.
are funding things outside without having it impact the grant.
I actually am familiar with what you're talking about, but I'd rather not go into it because it might get me in trouble. Okay. Also, I have a couple of questions for the architect. Oh, I'm sorry.
Before you get to that, Joel, thank you very much for your donation. But the MSBA has changed the policy about, for instance, utility company rebates. And there are many of those these days. They will not reduce their grant if the town were to seek and be awarded those kind of grants.
Yeah, that's been around for a couple of years now, I think.
It wasn't always there.
Okay.
But it's substantial now.
Yeah, okay.
Particularly in this school where we're going to be very energy efficient and using geothermal wells. There's significant amounts of money in the hundreds of thousands of dollars available in grants.
Yeah, we had a workaround for that too, but okay. Carl, were there any other sites or options or sites considered other than this specific site?
The existing South School site, both where the building is now and behind the existing
I mean, any other
school.
site in the town?
Yes, in the sense that we did sort of review what we had looked at for the high school. We sort of identified, publicly owned lands, and quickly a lot of reasons that they were rejected was because of location. We needed a site in the south part of town to replace the South School. And otherwise, they were rejected because there wasn't enough buildable land on any of the available parcels. So yes, we did look at other sites, and we didn't want to take the golf course. That was the only other one that had buildable land in that part of town.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Carl, could you go back to the drawing that shows the footprint for a quick second?
Sure. The site plan?
Yeah, well, that right there.
Oops.
Yeah, just before that.
Next one back.
Yeah, right there.
Oh.
Whoop, that's it, right there. As you know, and I know, that one of the MSBA requirements in your design is that it needs to be ability to expand at a later date.
Mm-hmm.
On the high school project, you did a really good job. You left a basic grassy area by the side. You could actually build another classroom building, literally,
Yep.
right there next to it without bothering anything else. What would be the plan if we wanted to expand this school, say, 10, 15, or 20 years from now?
Right at the end of one of these wings, we've reserved space right here. And being, it's a relatively small footprint, but being a 3-story building, we could easily add 6 more classrooms right there, which is, another 120 students, which is a fairly significant amount of expansion for a school this size. As you said, that was required by the MSBA, and they reviewed it, and we're okay with it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carl.
Thanks, Joel.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, if I could just finish up here, I have a couple of questions for Dr. Beata, because he's a really nice guy. Joe, if the new school were available this coming September, how would it impact your staff count and costs?
So in general, right now, because we have increased enrollment taking place, the idea that it would be, we'd be seeing cutting of staffing would be pretty neutral in terms of a growing population of enrollment significantly in K-5 as we speak, and we're projected to go to almost 4,200 students over the next 10 years from the current 3,700. Most of that is being seen at the elementary level on a regular basis. Our class sizes have increased this year alone as well. Some of that, as we know, we have another situation that's taking place in town that's been impacted by that. But when we look at increased enrollment, we're looking at solely residents of the town. So I don't see necessarily classroom teachers in areas being saved. What I do see with consolidation and so on is areas of special areas, including special education and ELL services. If you think about it, this new school right now is going to be housing some of our special education programming. We fought very hard to make sure that the school had that opportunity. This will be the first school in Stoughton at the elementary level that's built after the 1972 IDEA federal law. In other words, the classroom spaces that are being put together for special education are aligned around the needs of special education. The reverse that we've been doing for 50 years or less than 50 years, but roughly, has been that we've taken general classrooms and had to cut them in half, put in bathrooms, whatever the case may be, which has a significant higher cost. Those are probably the two most direct things that I could provide you based on what we know today.
Well, it's very similar to what actually happened at the high school.
Correct.
Okay. So, excuse me, the new school is based on combining the current South Elementary School with the Wilkins Elementary School. What will happen to those two buildings after the new school is completed? Do you anticipate additional funding articles in the future for these buildings?
So when you look at, just to be careful, when we're looking at this new school, we're not looking at taking Wilkins students and putting them at the South.
Thank you.
We are redistricting the entire district K-5, regardless if this project goes through or not, because of space issues. This project provides us further space flexibility, if you will. We have a current subcommittee from the school committee that is working on providing the school committee options on what to do with the South, Wilkins, and Jones. That subcommittee is meeting next Monday to provide and organize its final, we're calling options. Those recommendations will go to the school committee, I believe, at the end of this month. The school committee will then make its decisions on what do we actually do with the South and with the Jones and Wilkins. In general, the idea is to look at moving forward from these schools. We're truly around the idea of consolidation. But we also have significant needs in areas such as alternative education and so on and so forth. But I don't see those in the future of the South School.
Okay, and on the new school, if it goes forward, will you be using it during the summer? I actually asked you this in another meeting, but yeah.
Yes, there's a commitment, and there's been no formal vote, of course, of the committee, but I know that the chair has spoken to this publicly. I've spoken to this publicly. This would be our a key site for us going forward because of how new it is and the dynamics that it would have for our summer programming. So
That
we would be
impact
utilizing
your cost or staff? Or?
It's pretty neutral because it's a couple of different things, right? We have required summer programming, and then we have programming which in the last few years, because of ESSER funding and grants, has been free, and now the school committee will be receiving from me some potential fee use summer programming, in other words, programs where parents pay for students to attend. But our extended summer program, or what's called extended school year, is driven around federal and state mandate around IDEA, students on an IEP, where their IEP calls for mandated summer schooling, which for us is a typical 8:30 to 1:30, 5 days a week for 5 weeks starting in July, ending in August. And so those costs are pretty much built into what we do on a regular basis and based on mostly enrollment.
Okay, thank you. And final question for you, Joe, or maybe not the final, but how will the new building be available for public use? What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different things, right? You've heard some of the issues around Election Day at the South School and access. So right now, this new building becomes literally our second elementary school, except for the Wilkins, which is the only one right now where there is a formal entranceway where it's completely locked from the rest of the building. So that'll be which right now the Wilkins we can do at, but the others, as you know, the gyms are internal gyms. Yes. This gym is an external gym, and some of the cafeteria as well. So it makes that concept of voting a lot easier for for the town if utilizing it in general. I think TJ has done a pretty good outline, in my opinion, of saying that, we have to balance, we want the school to be used by the community. The balancing is always what happens during the school day and the use of a building and its facilities versus when school is not in session. And in today's world, you're always going to hear from the superintendent that while school is in session, it's really difficult to allow for the public to use the site. However, that still allows all of the summer times, that allows after-hour extension, and of course, we've had in the past and continue to have strong youth organizations that are going to be able to use. And one of the reasons why this gymnasium is actually will now become basically our second biggest gymnasium and up to date of all the other gymnasiums that we have at the elementary schools.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your indulgence.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the questions. Laura, do you have a question? No, we cannot hear you.
It worked for me.
Nope. Can't get any closer to this mic without it getting...
No, it's not working.
Nice, John. Oh, look at this one. It works. Giving me a false mic. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that later. So a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for the really thoughtful presentation. I think everything is laid out really clearly. And I especially appreciate you putting it in the context of the greater plan for the schools in Stoughton. And while I understand that the article is specific to the South School, I have a few questions about kind of how it fits and what the overall benefits are to the larger educational plan and that. But before I go into that, just as someone that went to the North School in the mid-'70s, it's really nice to see that we're finally improving some of these schools that have been around since I was very small. So it does not go without appreciation. So I have three related questions, and some of them build off of some of what Joel was saying, but in a slightly different perspective. So I'm just going to walk through the three questions, and then we can decide how best to answer them. So with the investment of the South School rebuild, will this take some of the pressure off of the burden on the existing schools for specifically the reduction of 5 to 4 schools? And the reason for my question is, I think you mentioned that there are a number of different schools that also need repair, and there's this initiative to go from 5 to 4. How does this fit within that bigger picture, and what kinds of things could that offset in the context of that bigger picture? The second is, do we have cost models to show kind of like a return on investment on the new South School in the context of the larger school education plan? So we're very focused right now on the budget for the actual planning and rebuild of this, but because it seems like something that's so integral to the bigger picture, I'm just wondering if we have some sort of way of illustrating the bigger benefit financially. There's clearly a bigger benefit from all the other things that you have mentioned in terms of the students and the public. And then the third question is, are the plans to build the school based on our capacity needs now, or is that something that is factoring in a projection of many of the things that you, Dr. Baeta, have talked about, whether it's due to just natural influx of families into the town or other factors? So a lot of questions, all related. I'll just leave that with you.
And I'll defer to some of our specialists that are here. So the capacity of any building project with the MSBA is at the whim of the MSBA, right? They are always been a very conservative group in terms of enrollment for a building. We have seen that at the high school. This is my 5th MSBA project, my 3rd building project as superintendent over the last 15 years, and I've always seen that the projects come in with a very specific number, 515 enrollment, that's the number, and if you're looking for 575 or 600, you are more than likely not going to get it. And we've seen this in almost every project that I've been involved with, and I'll defer to the experts who I think would support that statement.
And just to interrupt really quickly, what is that number?
That is 515 currently.
And for us or for what MSBA is?
Yeah, and that was an increase from 4 something. I wasn't here for that increase, but is that 515? MSBA.
The number that they're...
Yeah, so we can give them all kinds of numbers. They recalculate their own numbers using their own formula.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay. The second on the financials and the potential, again, I'll defer to some of my folks here who probably have more specifics, but here's the way I think of it. This is my 5th project. My first project was $295 a square foot to build. It's over $900 today. So if not now, when? And if not now at the cost that we have, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, this project is going up significantly. And I'll try to give an example of a renovation addition project that I did in my last community with an additional 39,000 square feet added, and it came in at just under 35 million. That project today wouldn't come in anything less than $15 to $25 million more based on what was done. I would offer the mathematicians in the room that the high school project today, based on the number that Joel gave earlier of the square footage, wouldn't even come close today to what we paid for it. So from that perspective, that's a financial issue that we have. In terms of day-to-day operations, there are some potential significant long-term that the school committee will get as part of our subcommittee recommendations in order to continue to look at alleviating or expanding or giving flexibility to the remaining elementary schools in order to continue to provide for an educational programming. And some of the examples that I'll give you is we do not want to continuously incorporate specialized programs having to go from one side of town to the other. An example of that, if I may, is if you have X program, I'll just call it that because I don't want to pinpoint any special populations. If you have X program and the only building in town is the Daw School and that's where you go, or the Gibbon Schools and that's where you go, there's a cost to that. There's a cost savings in some ways because you're getting one group of students together, but then there's transportation costs that go along with that that are right now completely out of control and going to continue to be out of control. So there's a potential with this new school, and we do have in this new school the continuing distribution, which is a philosophy that I'm going to continue to really push, that that students, once we redistrict, that we are looking at specialized programs from the perspective that students are staying within their, quote, district school, if you will. Because there's an impact on families and so on and so forth. So there's a potential there. We are already starting to work those numbers in terms of the educational benefit and the potential long-term program. And I'll finish with this. We currently have 14 specialized programs in elementary education. Over the next 10 years, that is probably going to double. In other words, the students who need that type of specialized attention, those numbers are going to double. Or you're going to tenfold your out-of-district placement numbers, which are significantly more expensive. If you include the hiring of a teacher and their benefits to the town and no longer have this longer transportation, tuition costs, and so on and so forth, the cost at the local level is significantly less.
I'm going to address some of the, your first question, which is kind of the long-term plan of the facilities. We do have that long-term facilities plan that's been updated. It was originally proposed in 2017. We updated it, and we updated again this year, or this past year. We do have another building project that we are in the future. Is the middle school. That would be the next one. At this point, we haven't even submitted our statement of interest. We don't know if that would be an addition renovation, what that would involve. We're not at that yet. But in terms of the elementary schools, our plan is with this consolidation and the repurposing of the Wilkins for another use within the district, most likely preschool, moving the preschool out of the Jones into the Wilkins school, that we would then be able to kind of delay. We wouldn't have to come back to the town every few years and say we need to do an extensive renovation or replace an elementary school, because it's just too much to ask this town to replace 5 small buildings one after the other, especially when we have the middle school on deck. We are looking at the future. The Daw and the Gibbons are both in excellent shape. They have very large classrooms. They both have very large spaces right next to them. They would be extremely easy to do an addition renovation on for in the future. And so that's what we are considering. The Hanson, perhaps that's another building we think about repurposing rather than renovating, but again, something to look at. So this sort of slows down our progression of buildings and allows us to focus, turn our attention to the middle school, and then think very thoughtfully, what about our enrollment? What are we going to do in the future? How are we going to approach this with the MSBA, or are we going to do it only by the town? So it allows us to kind of slow down.
And that's exactly what I was trying to get to, and I think that's a really, really important point, that we're not looking at schools necessarily on an individual basis, but they're part of a larger plan that's going to overall benefit the school system, you know, as an ecosystem rather than just one school at a time. So I think that's really important context to give when this is presented at town meeting. And that's exactly what I was looking for. So thank you both very much.
All right, thank you. Lisa, you have a question?
Yes, I have a few. I first just want to pick up where Lauren just left off. I'm just concerned. I also like to look at the whole ecosystem, and I'm just concerned we don't have enough of a complete picture of what is going to happen with the Wilkins, the South, and the Jones should this school be built. I know Monday night we said on one hand, well, the committee before us, the presenters before us, mentioned that on one hand we could shutter the South School, and on the other hand it could house special programs. All these decisions are pertinent in my mind, and in order to make a prudent decision, we need to understand all the financial impacts of each of these decisions. And it seems to me that there are way too many unanswered questions so let me just state that off the bat. Then I just wanted to point out a few other items here. So I ran through an amortization schedule, the South School with the numbers that we were given versus the high school. So I ran it, and anybody can see this. Anybody who wants it, please reach out to me. I can give this to you. I ran a 20-year, 25-year, and 30-year off the South School, and I ran it at 4% conservatively. We can change these and play with these numbers, and I strongly encourage everybody to do this. I'll give you the calculator. It's a very simple process. So basically, on a $66,120,000 project at 20 years at 4%, that would add $30,041,000 in interest to bring the total project cost to $96,161,806. And that's just on the town side. That doesn't include the grant money from the state, which I hope everybody does realize is taxpayer money at the state level. And this population would serve 25% of the town. So we have less than 4,000 children in the town versus 30,000 residents. I just want to get a scale, economies of scale I heard earlier. I just want that out there. If we go to the 30-year, were you suggesting 30-year? That the interest alone jumps $17 million for a complete project cost. I'll just leave it at that. It's astronomical. I'm not going to have people's heads go crazy. Compared to the high school, which serves 100% eventually of the children in the town. So on that scale, I ran that at 3%. And I'll put this out there for everyone. It's just deeply concerning how much this is going to cost. And I want everybody to understand, because some tax-paying citizens don't understand, the word debt exclusion means it is above and beyond your tax base already. And the taxpayers are already paying for the high school for 20 years, plus now the fire station for, I'm going to say, thank you, plus 30 years. Should we take this on, that would be in addition. So this is over 30 years. I'm just going to say it. It's beyond my understanding how we as a town, when interest rates were down at 0%, we didn't take on more of these projects. Or we have to space them out. The burden on the taxpayer, as everyone else in here and in our town, wants the very best for our children, not only in this town, throughout the whole world. However, we are the Finance Committee, and it is our job to point out there are limited funds, unless anybody can show me how we don't have to live in a society with money anymore. We cannot exclude that consideration. So then, moving on, I would like to ask, is with this debt exclusion, has any of it, like the high school, been considered to be included, I'm sorry, like the fire station, like 2/3 was excluded debt and 1/3 was included, including meaning in the budget? Like, where have we as a town, this is why I got involved, I'm just so upset that we have been so generous to the schools for decades. We have not been saving enough for big projects like this. Let me just pause right there and ask any one of the presenters if any of this is going to be included. So it is not, because debt exclusion is on top of taxpayer levy, whereas if it was included in the budget, it wouldn't be in addition on top of. Anybody, please?
Sure. I have to say, I can't really take issue with anything you've said, but I also want to clarify what I said at the beginning, is that our role is to recommend a project that solves a problem that was identified back in 2010. So we recommend what is the most feasible and economically feasible, certainly is part of that. Under the MSBA regs, too, they don't ask us to go out and design a building without regard to what the town and the taxpayers can afford. But to your question, so first of all, there is on the DOR website, you can go, there's a debt service calculator. It's an Excel program. You can go in, you can plug in an amount, a rate, a term, hit enter, and you get a whole amortization.
That's what I've done.
So you know, under a 30-year plan, it's about a $4.45 million annual debt service under a 30-year plan. It's about a 5.3, if I remember correctly, or excuse me, like a $4.8 million. I don't have it in front of me, I apologize, but it's about 4.8 million and change for under a 20-year borrowing plan.
Are you talking about the interest? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the annual debt service.
Oh, okay. I'm talking about the overall project.
To my point, you asked the question is how much could be paid for outside of the debt exclusion. So it's a policy decision. And I say that with emphasis because all we do is recommend a project. That's a policy decision. I'm with you. if we can find a better way for people to pay for it and to fit in with the broader profile, financial profile of the town. I'm with you entirely, and I'll sit next to you to advocate for the best thing. What we can do is just give you the numbers and recommend something. So 30-year, let's say we use that 30-year number. Interest, yeah, over 30 years is enormous. I will point out just in that picture that we've already paid off 7 years of a 20-year note under the high school. I know the other night I said I thought it was 30 years. I confirmed it. We were actually recommended to borrow, when we consolidated the high school debt, we were recommended to borrow at a 30-year term. It wasn't. It was borrowed in tranches up to a point like 2018-19, then it was consolidated under a 20-year term, and I think our rate at that time was about 2.5%, somewhere around there. So less than that? Yeah, we had a really good rate back then, and that was actually improved prior to our borrowing.
Well, that's my concern. Right? To your point, like, I want to pace it for the
Yeah.
taxpayer. This is like
Here's how
choking them.
And I don't dispute that at all. It is going to be tough. Part of it's because of, as was pointed out by a previous speaker, years of, I hate to use the word neglect, but I would say inactivity on our school buildings. And the schools certainly, they do have a good chunk of the annual budget, but I look at this and I could rattle off a list of horribles if we don't do this project, but I'm not going to be around to deal with it. That's going to be Catherine, Dr. Baeta, and, the rest of us will leave it all to you to figure out.
But if I can just interrupt you there, our blessed firemen went over 100 years without their building. So all I'm asking all the time is for a balance. This seems over the top. I just want a balance. Pace it, pace it, pace it.
If it's paced, if you're catching up for 50 years of inactivity on our school buildings.
I have been watching. We've poured millions of dollars into our schools.
On our school buildings. If we haven't built a new building since 1971.
I'm not talking about a new building.
This is my point. My point is now we're at a point with the South School, we're in crisis. I don't think that's denied by many people. We can't use that building for much longer.
Yeah, God bless you.
So something needs to be done that's for other people. But if you're talking about the affordability right now, which I think is the nub of your question, right? How do we afford this in the town's profile and on the individual level? Both, right?
Well, just so you know the overall picture, and I'm also concerned because we've been so generous to the schools, we've literally neglected our infrastructure, which is also over 100 plus, and I'm being very conservative, years old. In other words, again, a balance. We have been incredibly generous. Our town meeting and...
TJ, do you have an answer to the original question?
Whether the debt's included, is any of this included so that it's not on top of the taxpayer already?
But it's not for us to decide, was my point.
So you don't know is what you're saying?
Please let TJ finish the question, the answer here.
We will never decide that. We will tell you how much it's going to cost. The policymakers, I assume with the advice of this board, will decide on the best borrowing package. The Board of Selectmen will sign a note. It will go out to market, and then you'll have an annual bill for it.
Yeah,
we don't decide that.
Yeah, I get that, but I thought I saw that in a motion with the fire station, and I didn't see it in this article, so that's where the question...
I think the original question, TJ, was about the split.
Process.
Was that your question, Lisa, about the split?
About the debt exclusion?
The split. Your question to TJ was the split, the 35-65 split. And your question was, why is that not being considered? Is that correctly what your question?
Yeah,
TJ,
if that's the debt for being included versus excluded.
Yeah, that was your original question, and it feels like this whole discussion has wandered down the road. Thank you.
I might be all in favor of it, but we don't decide that. We just give you the numbers.
Okay, and so moving on from there, thank you. And I did neglect to say, I want to extend my appreciation to you, all the building committee people, Dr. Baeta, and everybody involved, because I do realize, just from being on the finance committee, how much time and effort you have put into this, and it is much appreciated. It's just, I have to point out these real concerns. So thank you for your time. And then also, another issue I had was the single primary entrance is of great concern to me. Just traveling around to the different schools just yesterday, I'm very concerned that the only entrance for parents, I understand there's an emergency access, which I'm concerned about that too, because that's all wetlands back there. And I know you said earlier you're working with Conservation Commission for a bridge or something over there. I know residents in that area are concerned. But back to the single primary entrance, that is of grave concern because given that the population that student population that you're talking about in there, I just wanted to point that out. And then a couple other items. When you say all electric, just to use one of your sustainability items, has anybody given us a cost estimate of, so I understand if we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody said that by us putting these sustainability items in there, we get greater grant money up front. But has anybody priced out how much it's going to cost us to run it? And the reason I say that is I just had a relative who was, basically crying that she has the solar panels on her roof and because her house is heated by electricity, and that her electric bill is astronomical because there's been no sun this winter. So has anybody priced that out? I'll pause there for that answer. So do you understand my question? So while we might be getting more grant money, would it be costing us longer in the long term?
Do you have an answer, please?
Chairman, sure.
Thank you.
Yes, we do look at operating costs and making these material and systems choices and recommendations to the building committee. And obviously, yes, the electric bill is going to be significant to heat and cool the building, but there's no gas bill. There's literally no gas bill. So the operating costs are projected, and the choices of going to an all-electric building were looked at.
But that's my concern. So we have that same relative. We compared our square footage is the same, and I have gas and she has electric, and she's paying way more than I am. And
Sure. I can't speak to your situation there, but I've been around long enough too that when I started in this business, we would never dream of having electric heat. And if her house is of that vintage, it's not very efficient. But the systems we have nowadays, for one, as we said, part of this is being fed by geothermal wells, so that's off of the electric grid. So only about 2/3 of the building is being heated and cooled by the power grid, and the systems in the building are much more efficient than the previous generation of electric heat.
Yeah, hers is a new house. It's just the builder did everything electrical. So,
and again,
do you understand the concern? It's when you're
sure,
comparing
and
gas.
We took that into account.
Okay.
And the district is actually required to submit an operating budget for a projected new school that includes utility costs. So they have factored that in.
Okay, I just wanted to see the comparisons there. And then...
Okay, I'm going to stop you there for a second. Did you have something to add, Chair Weiss?
Yes, we have calculated, unfortunately I don't have it with me, but Ms. Husseini has the numbers on running the new high school, which is granted not all electric, but mostly electric, versus something like the Jones School. And it's a factor of, what is it?
High school is, I believe, based on what Joyce is saying.
Do you have a microphone over there that you could answer this, please?
The high school is, these buildings are incredibly energy efficient because of the envelope as well. They keep their heat and cooling. The high school, the way Joyce calculated, was 7 cents a square foot, and I think the Jones is 33, or the Jones was 33, and the South is 28.
Yeah, I'm just looking to compare apples to apples to the previous speaker's point there of different generations, so that wouldn't be apples to apples.
So are you saying that the cost per square foot is about a quarter of it, 7 cents versus 28 cents?
That's correct.
Okay, I wanted to catch that. Okay, thank you. you have another question, Lisa?
Yep, the last one, I just want to confirm, I heard Monday night, so the high school included demolition costs in their project, and of great concern to me is this $114 million project does not include the demolition of the South School, and that I also heard that the South School could either be used, could be shuttered, which would be just another eyesore in the town, or it could be used for special programs, and like either one of those, that's a point of that. We don't have a complete picture to make a prudent fiscal decision on this project, so that was a concern.
Do you have a response to this, Dr.
I do. As it pertains to the subcommittee's recommendation to the full school committee next week, there is no recommendation to use that building for specialized programming.
Okay, and the demolition is in fact not included in this budget, correct?
Currently correct.
Okay.
That's crazy.
All right,
know.
thank you very much. Joel, did you?
Just a very short thing to what Lisa was asking about. Tim, do you want to explain the difference between eligible cost for reimbursement between the high school and South Elementary School on the demolition of the existing?
Yeah, well, the demolition on the high school was reimbursable because it was part of the site and part of the project. The demolition for the south would not be reimbursable because it's not part of the project.
And that's the MSBA rule, right?
That's the MSBA rule in terms of
thank you.
eligible for reimbursement, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, thank
To
you.
that point, as a follow-up, it still leaves us with an unanswered question as to the use and
Well, I think
what
the
it's going to look
superintendent- I
at.
think the superintendent said that there was not specified programming for that. Is that correct, Dr. Bayetta? I think it was answered, but
Yeah, the recommendation does not have the South School being utilized for the purposes of specialized education in any way, shape, or form.
all right, thank you.
Yeah, I was
John,
just asking, what would it be used for then? As a complete, I'm just looking for
So what
complete
the question
answers.
the question is, Dr. Bayetta, I believe the question is, what would the building be used for?
Right, so the purposes of that building was through town meeting in 1956 to be used as a school. This will now become, at the next level, it'll become a policy decision between A, the first part, the school committee saying the school is closed, and then B, that would be potentially turned over to the select board to make a decision as a policy board on the actual building itself going forward. It'd be a two-step process.
All right, thank you very much for that. John, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Please make sure the mic's on so everyone at home can hear you.
Sorry about that. Okay. I'm just a little confused because if I'm not mistaken, I thought it was said a little earlier that it would be repurposed for pre-K? Well, the Wilkins would?
No, so the subcommittee's current work that they're doing that's going to the school committee, which was the governing body that will make that decision, is looking at the idea that the Wilkins would be utilized as a preschool. There's also a couple of other suggestions and ideas, but the potential is that the South School is closed, the Wilkins becomes the preschool. We would have, in one scenario, for example, the administration would stay at the Jones School and potentially the now preschool would become an alternative 6 to 12 school for the purposes of alternative education. Or there's another option on the table that actually the South School is closed and the Jones Schools are closed. Those are all options going to the school committee.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question, please. I'm just not clear either on the grant monies or monies that will be given to us through the state. Are those guaranteed?
Yes, I mean, they're guaranteed, they're funded, the state pool is funded by the sales tax, by 1% of the sales tax. So it is guaranteed that it will come in because we reimburse on a per month basis. It isn't, we don't spend the money and then look for the reimbursement at the end of the project. It's a rolling reimbursement and it comes in as the project is built. What we don't know until the costs are all in is exactly how much that grant is. We know the maximum grant would be that 47.9 million.
So it could be a lesser amount, a medium amount, or the most that
If it's a lesser amount, then the town share likely would be lesser
Increase.
as well.
Oh, the
Because
town-
we don't know what the final, this is the budget, this isn't the final cost.
Oh, okay.
Until they come in.
And then I'm
Like in
just,
the high school, it came in $5 million or so less than that budget.
Okay, all right. And then, I don't know if this is applicable in this case, but is the 9C reduction also applicable to this, like, or that's a separate entity? Okay, I just wasn't sure. Thank you so much.
Right. John, do you have a question?
Some questions, comments, what have you. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. Would have been nice to have had that ahead of time. I couldn't even get it open, it was so big. That was the message I got off my town email. Too big to open. But anyway, I did want to thank you all for the presentation and the hard work you've done. Just as a point of information, for those of you who may not remember this, when they were deciding on putting in a statement of interest back a ways for the high school, the South School was actually rated worse back in 10 years ago. And the South School was rated worse. And the only reason they proceeded with the high school ahead of it was the high school was being threatened with loss of accreditation. So they had to make that decision, and you couldn't have your high school lose accreditation because then all your students are kind of up the creek. So just a point of information, it's been 10 years since we knew the South School was in worse condition than the high school. And I think you people, everybody should know that. I happen to know it because we were on the board at the time when it was being done. And I want to make sure I understand this now, because I was hearing one thing and then maybe another, whatever, with the schools. Because I thought originally, I know a previous speaker had mentioned the motion strictly says South School. So there was, even though talk has been about consolidating and anything, the motion strictly says that it's to replace the South School. Now, this is the motion that we've been given, and from what I understand, this has gone through council and bond council, and that this motion has been approved as it is. So can you guarantee, the reason I'm going to say this is right in this room, we were told by town council, it doesn't matter what you're told, it's what's written in the book, because that's what gets certified. And he sat right over there and he held up that warrant and he said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I can only go by this. And that was the sealed warrant when they did the special for the fire station. And that was his answer. I can only go by what's here. So we've been educated enough now that you can't go by what's talked about. It's what's written. And that's my concern when I saw this, because I thought the intent was to affect other schools as well. And I just want to make sure that this is exactly what you want, that you're going to ask to replace the South School, because I'm sure others are going to ask it. Either one.
When you go back to, and you, I'm not an attorney, but the fact is this is a South School project.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that the district is consolidating has been blessed by the MSBA, and the redistricting has nothing to do with the MSBA. So I believe that the language that you're getting is correct. That's
so you're comfortable with that?
I am, because
Okay.
we're not seeking any funds for the Wilkins School or the Jones School or anything like that within this.
So that would be more of a result of building the new school would give you that much more flexibility with the rest of them.
Yeah, and I'll give you a perfect example. I was the superintendent in Holbrook when we went from a junior senior high school project to a consolidated first and only in the Commonwealth pre-K to 12 one building district. But the vote at that time was actually for Holbrook Junior Senior High School, not a consolidation.
Okay. And then, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry,
Can
go
I
ahead.
ask, did you get confirmation that it's been approved by town council and bond council? Because we haven't, and that's a phone call that I need to make.
All right, well, that was my understanding.
Okay.
But, I mean, that's what we were given for the warrant, and that's what's in there. Personally, I can't make a motion to change it because I don't know enough about it on how it would have to be written.
So from our perspective, it tracks the feasibility study agreement and That's the exact same language that we use
Okay.
for the high school.
That's fine. I mean, if we hear anything, they'll have to, well, we've seen motions made on the floor of town meeting when they had to correct a motion that seemed to be a little bit more than what was asked originally, but it was just a concern when I had that. And then the way that you were talking about the school, so then my understanding now is that it's strictly to replace the South School. That's what you're looking to build, is to replace the South School. And if that would go forward, and I don't think I saw, when would this be expected to be done?
It's opening in September of '27.
And then when it was ready, it would just give the district the opportunity, and actually it would give you a few years to figure it out, on if you were going to redistrict, whether you want to consolidate the school, however you want to do it, but by redistricting and the use of the buildings themselves would be determined in this time frame. But it is basically, you're looking at 3 schools that are affected off the top of your head. You know, it's, of course, the South School. The Jones, we know where that stands now anyway. And then the Wilkinson would obviously be affected if that's the way you're looking at it.
Yeah, so you're going to have to, if you take a look at your heat map of where your enrollment's taking place, that's what you're going to have to use about a year out from the actual change of your redistricting. So you could have so many different combinations that could take place, and we're going to have to reestablish cut zones and mapping, if you will, but you have to take a look at, I'll just say this, more than likely the school committee would receive specific detailed information and preparation for a vote with all kinds of community input and all of that by the fall of '26. Typically, redistricting comes a year before the year of the implementation.
Sure.
If, in fact, town meeting supports this and then the voters, we will begin immediately putting together a working group to start to take a look over time on where do we see our heat map taking place, where there are potential other buildings that is taking place, condos, rental property, new property, whatever it may be, because those always have an impact. And then the last part that we would take a look at really is, what are the other schools going to look like as part of that? We know we have a new school, but what is happening at the other schools that makes them good schools, if you will, that has X, Y, Z, whatever it may be? I think of, for example, a question that was asked, you're going to have a wonderful STEM lab, brand new STEM lab in this brand new school. What experiences are the other kids going to have, the other students going to have in K-5? Are they also going to have a STEM? That gives us time to take a look at how do we do that? How do we make sure that we have that same type of experience taking place with all the kids in K-5, not just because they're in a brand new building?
All right, but that's a fair characterization, that you are looking to replace the South, and then whatever else comes out of it would just be a product of now looking at the whole system because of this new school being there.
Yeah, and so when the MSBA accepted the educational plan, which is about 80 pages long, clearly articulates the Wilkins School, quote, being part of the district redistricting, and that building it would literally no longer be a K-5 elementary school, that it would be utilized for other purposes, and the district made it at that time that we were looking at what our options would be.
All right.
So your elementary schools would be the Daw, the Hanson, the Gibbons, and the new school, and a preschool potentially is going to the Wilkins.
Okay. Just to address one of the comments that Mr. Recupero made, is people have to understand, schools don't own any buildings. The town, the school is charged with using them, maintaining them, et cetera. They do not own any of them. Only the town owns the buildings. If a building is no longer going to be used for a school, as he said, that would then, if the school committee took a vote, they're not going to use it, they're going to close the school down, and just be done with it, it would revert back to the board to determine what they want to do with that property. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that. Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I thought it would. Yeah, my other one worked just fine. I just want to say that for the record. No, we're good. It's too close to the speaker. This actually, I think, is just a point of order to you, Vaughn. There was an idea from a previous speaker to put on the table a split. Who knows what the split would actually be? And it was a positive idea in that the petitioners are also going to have a nice offering to the voters because they're going to be voting less of a debt exclusion, so everybody wins. But in order to do it, it's not only a calculation that they've asked us to help them with, but also how to change the wording, as another previous speaker was saying how important the words are in the motion. So incorporating a change in the motion has to be looked at by council, and we don't have council here. So it sounds like if we're going to go down the path of doing something that's as positive a change as that we have to do it properly, right?
Yeah, we would have to do it properly. It's, yeah, we would need, I don't know that we can do that. TJ, do you have a response on this?
Yeah, I don't have the text of the article in front of me, but what you're doing under this article is you're authorizing the Board of Selectmen to raise and appropriate and or borrow, blah, blah, blah. I mean, if you want to put some constraints on that, that's prescribed, that article is prescribed language. It's boilerplate, if I could put it like that, from MSBA. And the debt exclusion language is not voters voting a certain percentage or a certain amount. Debt exclusion vote is yes or no. Do you vote to exceed the debt, the Prop 2.5 cap under a debt exclusion, yes or no?
I'll correct you on that, because when they did the fire station, they set the split 65-35.
We could.
All right, but and that's why I mentioned for that particular project, a totally new motion was presented the night we took the article up. And
So,
I mean, I'm going to recommend we leave this motion alone, and if we're looking to get it changed, that we would do that through council and so forth, and in a timely manner, submit an alternate motion that might include something like that. That would be my recommendation, because that's what happened on that last project. It came in that night and it was allowed to go, and it was, in my opinion, totally different than what everybody had heard during all the hearings, so.
Well, so if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, just very briefly, the principal difference between the fire station borrowing article and this one, and the debt exclusion and this one, is that the language for both the debt exclusion language and the article are both prescribed from MSBA. If we change those, we'd have to get those approved by MSBA. I don't think we can say, sitting here, and maybe Tim could, that MSBA would allow certain changes. They give you the language, they ask you to tailor it to your project, and that's what we did. So.
Yeah, that's my understanding also on MSBA. We just can't change whatever we want. It's very specific.
That's very true, I know.
And I'm not even sure MSBA allows a split. That part, I don't know. Dave, did you have any other questions?
Oh, I do. I do have questions. I wanted to start through you, Vaughn, to just, well, first, thank you all for coming. Yes, I also concur. You guys do work very hard. There was a lot of energy put into this, and very large groups attended each of the meetings. I had a couple things. Early on, I saw the date for the election, for a townwide election, was going to be in August. And then it changed over time to being like this spring, summer type language, and now it got fixed into June.
No.
Why did that change?
It didn't. You and I had this discussion a couple weeks ago. You were looking at the 2023 calendar, where we had an August target for preferred schematic. Is that correct, Carl? Yeah.
Okay.
So, and this has always been targeted for a May, June town meeting and election date, never in August.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because that was how I understood it watching. At least that was the impression I got from when I was watching
I
it.
think that was the 2023 timeline.
Okay. Now that we have Dr. Baeta here, I'm very happy that you came. There were some questions that came up that we couldn't get answered, and I have the perfect time to be able to ask it now. What is an interventionist?
This is not relative.
It's very relevant.
It is not relative to the South School project.
Okay, hang on. No, that wasn't.
We're going to keep discussion.
No, excuse me, to you, Vaughn. I did look at your concern about what's on the agenda. Embedded into this project is there's a slide going to the South School Building Committee on August 23rd of 23. 4 bullets, very prescribed definition of how this building is going to be used for special ed. The feedback we got from the school committee on what happened with the interventionists was that they were being rolled over into special ed, and there was another question around $184 that just kind of disappeared into the budget for ostensibly was going to be used for RISE positions, which actually has a dedicated area in this school.
Are we back on the $184,000
No, I'm saying there's multiple areas of operating budget that are very
Do you have
specific.
questions that are relative
very
to this article?
specific to this building project.
What is your question that's relative to this
What
article?
is an
Dave?
interventionist, and what's the difference between being involved with the grant to bring students back from COVID and then the change in their title to be able to handle special ed?
This is not relative to this article, Dave.
Vaughn, I just outlined it absolutely is, because
Excuse me, there's a whole wing in here.
Yes.
It is directly related
Please,
to the article
Please
through
wait
you,
to be
Vaughn.
recognized. Don't just interrupt.
Oh.
What is your question exactly? What is an interventionist?
What is an interventionist? Because they came into the budget for helping kids get back back into the classroom, and now they're
budget is
special
not
ed.
relative
Are
to this
they? I
discussion.
want to understand if they're going to be rolled into being able to operate in the new
The
building.
budget is not relative to this.
It is, because
How is that?
there's 2 spots. One was the 10 new positions as interventionists who are now
10 new
special
positions
ed.
that are in the budget.
There's 2
right?
spots. Vaughn, I'm telling you where I found it. 10 positions are now brand new special ed instructors instead of interventionists, unless interventionist is some
Are
type
these
of
10 new
special ed.
positions
And I
relative
don't
to
understand
this?
how the connection is, which is why the question. The other area was the RISE positions, which are...
Which is also not relative to
It
this
is,
article.
because it's...
It is not.
It is, because they're using... How much does it affect the operating budget when you dedicate a wing of a building for the special ed? It affects operations. Questions have been asked all around. Why was it okay to ask how the efficiency of having fewer schools administratively, how does that become a positive impact to the town? That was allowed, and I can't, and you're trying to say that because I'm talking about a topic that's apparently a sensitive topic, that I'm somehow not allowed to ask it.
I'm sensitive to the definition of a word now.
I'm asking.
Is that what you're implying?
Well, why are you blocking it then? It's the same question.
Because
How
you're
is this
going to try to
impacting
ask every question about the budget during this article, is what you're trying
I'm
to
actually, you want to know what else, Vaughn? I'm kind of concerned and curious as to why you're the person who's questioning me about my questions when you're the chair. I mean, it sounds like we're in a debate when you're the chair. Chairs don't usually get involved at that level. But there it is.
Somebody has to make sure that these questions stay somewhat relative to the article, so we're not swapping recipes here.
We're not. We're talking very specifically about how this affects the operation of the school district, because we have changes going on in the operating budget as it goes to the special ed in the school.
Do you have any questions that are relative to this article?
I just mentioned it. It's affecting, just as it affects the administration, the efficiencies trying to glean from how many teachers and how many administrators, the same question applies to special ed, especially when it comes to new
So
positions.
your question is, you want to define a position?
I want to understand what it is. It came to us.
Not connected to the article. Do you have any questions relative to the article?
It's directly part of the article, not.
No, it is not. It is part of the budget. You asked this at the budget. I think Eric actually answered your question during that.
He did not, he found it on some kind of .com website, which attempted
He did try,
attempted to
yes.
answer. I think
Do
it's
you
a
have
re-
any questions that are relative, other than this?
I actually do. I
Thank
just
you.
can't believe I'm getting into an argument with the chair over asking a question, but there it is. All right. Well, I'm not sure if you want to recognize, all right, if you
You
want to
had- you said you had
recognize
another
Lisa, I'll
question.
save my questions if you want to recognize Lisa.
I'm waiting for your questions. I'm waiting for your questions, Dave.
You're not going to recognize Lisa?
You said you had another question.
I have several.
Well, then
Okay.
let's get to the questions.
Okay. Okay. So there's a lot of building spaces that have to do with authentic collaboration, meeting spaces, all these kinds of things. Are any of these spaces, or even on the community side of things, the pickleball court, like how much is excluded from the 42% that's going to be granted by MSBA? What are the extras that are put into the project?
The spaces inside the building have been approved by the MSBA in terms of being
I
eligible.
mean, the things that are excluded from being, calculated as qualifying for a match, like if it's 42% of 100 million, is it, is the extra 14 million the amount that, it's not 42 million, so forgive my math, but how much of it is not being calculated against at 42%? There's got to be is everything being calculated in, the pickleball courts, all the community spaces?
In what I was answering Joel Wolk's question about the caps, that's how the grant is calculated.
So community extras have a number that the MSBA will match. They'll match those kinds of things.
So that when they exceed a certain percentage of the cap, those are excluded from being reimbursed. So in the case of the site here, it did exceed the cap. I don't have it in front of me, Joel might have it, but so whether that would be so they don't look at the pickleball courts as a discrete thing, as a discrete item. The site development itself exceeded the cap, which would include the pickleball courts. I don't know if
Okay,
that's
but there's
clear,
no
that's
hard
how-
number, there's no hard number that says this is everything that exceeded the cap that we're including in the design. Is there a number like 150,000 or that's exceeding the cap, what we're doing anyway?
Do you have the Form 3011, or could I look at it, or? Yeah, Kyle, did you want to contribute to that?
If I could,
Would you like to answer this?
Mr. Chairman, at least from a space point of view for the building, the program, the MSBA has a very detailed space summary template, and along with that, they have their guidelines as to what they consider quote-unquote eligible. In this project, all of those special ed spaces that are in this school are all eligible for reimbursement. There are no extra spaces. The only spaces that were excluded are fairly minor. And if you can see these floor plans up here. In the gymnasium, we increased the square footage by about 4 feet on one side of the gymnasium in order to fit a couple rows of bleachers in. Again, partly for the elementary school use, but also for community use. That amount of space, I think it's somewhere around 400 square feet, is excluded from eligibility. And otherwise, the only other very minor ones were if they say a classroom can be 900 square feet, and we just through layout, we may have one that's 910 square feet, because these are quote-unquote bean counters, that 10 square feet, there are a few of those, but I think the word is de minimis. The addition of the bleachers is the only community space in the building, you might say, that is additional.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I just wanted to see if we could quantify it in dollars as to which parts of the project were above and beyond what the MSBA had within the cap. Is there a hard number?
Yeah, of the $114 million total project budget, about $37 million is excluded from reimbursement. from being reimbursed at Stoughton's reimbursement rate, which is 65%, plus or minus.
The administration is not included either.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And another question has to do with the RISE portion or any other special ed sections of the school. How much square footage is in special ed or specifically RISE spaces?
Specifically, there are 3 RISE classrooms in the building. They stack right here in the middle of the building. They're each about 900 square feet, so 3 times 900 is 2,700 square feet. Again, all of it's eligible for reimbursement.
Yeah, no, I understood about the reimbursement. I just wanted to know how much was set aside for that. I appreciate that. So on the O'Donnell Middle School, because from the facilities plan, it shows that it only had a D, it had a grade of D, which was worse than the Wilkins itself that's actually being, shut down as a school and converted to something else. How many years are you going to be able to hold off from actually putting in an SOI for the middle school to avoid having it overlap as a third school? We already know that 2036 is when we're going to be done paying off the high school. So I'm looking at like 12 years out, maybe 11 years out by the time you actually start paying a bond on this new school. But how many years out can we push out the middle school?
So the first step that has to take place is that the school committee, with their vote and then a vote of the select board, signs off on a statement of interest. That statement of interest would be filed. Typically, that's between February and March of the year. And then you wait to see how many projects are going in. There could be a request for 60, 70 projects, and based on the 1 cent that MSBA gets from sales taxes, they may choose to do 12 projects, 9 projects, 8 projects. It's all going to depend on them seeing how big of a project is this, and them saying how much do we think it's potentially going to cost, and them saying we can only afford X number of dollars. In this particular case, just for the sake of argument, if you were to put it in let's say 2026 or 27 as a statement of interest, you could potentially get it that year or the following year. You'd be going for a feasibility study a year later, and so on and so forth. It's all going to depend on when the school committee, and then it would support a select board, decide to file a statement of interest.
So, yeah, thank you. You can obviously tell, I'm trying to see how many years of overlap we're going to be paying for 3 schools.
Yeah.
We couldn't borrow at that, though.
I appreciate it, yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't borrow that. You know the debt capacity. You've seen the statement, and I have too. We couldn't borrow that money for that school until we get another school off the books or another capital project off the books.
So you're in agreement then that we obviously need to have that project pushed out past the high school payment?
I'm in agreement that
right.
we won't get the money to do that project. I mean, we'll be, you've seen the debt statement. I know, we've talked about this. That we wouldn't have the borrowing capacity to do a middle school until we get something else off the books.
Yeah, and I want to just add as a comment, a lot of people talking about holistically looking at all the things in the school district and the town, is that we talked about the fact that maintenance, the schools have done a good job of putting a maintenance number in, which actually contributes to net school spending, so it's a really positive thing. But the more money you can put into maintenance of these schools, the more we can potentially push out and possibly make it so that we're not doing all the schools at one time in 50 years from now, but maybe have it truncated so in such a way where there's not as much overlap over time, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great point in the process of how you make a decision at the school committee level, and I'll just give you a point of, that's always been a point of contention for me as a former school committee member who put in modular classrooms that were supposed to be at the middle school for 10 years and have been there for 24 years, with a septic system and, all kinds of stuff that was to be a stopgap. At that time, the idea was, and the new MSBA, this was under the old MSBA, which is a whole different animal. So my biggest concern that I have is the ability for the school department, and I know through you, Dave, not necessarily supported, that the school department in those types of instances do have some capital items that are allowed to elongate the time available at the middle school. In other words, I'm not thinking of a roof, millions of dollars. I'm thinking of certain items around not only safety, but some of the items that you've seen this year that I've put forth under capital being supported as a way to elongate a school like the middle school having. You'll see in the future of requests for some new doors in that building. Again, not hundreds or millions of dollars, but enough to get us to be able to consider a plan such as the one that you're saying and TJ supported, that we need to get as close or get a school coming off in order to get another one in. That middle school project is going to be a wower of a number. It is, if you think this number is a whopper, wait until you see the middle school number.
Yeah, I saw the
10 or 12 years from now, don't forget that.
It's in the plan. You actually publish it. It's on your website. If anybody wants to look at it. In the facilities plan, it shows it is a big number. I read it.
And that number doesn't include what we just went through with all of the inflation situations.
Yeah, of course. I think I just want to wrap up with just a comment, is that I'm not happy with the design. I think it's way over the top of what's it looks to me almost like a Stonehill College, branch location. It's just so over the top designed that, and it's in the woods, and it's only, as a previous speaker said, I think between probably 25 to 30% because it's a bigger school than the other three that'll be online. But it's serving. Think about it. You're serving 30% at most of the population of students. It's costing just as much as a school that holds double that, because the high school is twice the size of this school, but it costs just as much as that school, even if you factor in inflation, which really started to spike just in the last couple of years. If you think about it, it was almost down to zero, kind of numbers of inflation not too long ago, in my memory, and if I could remember. But it's just so much more money serving such a small fraction of the town. It's just hard for me to get behind this. And I used to run. I ran for office, and I went with a video camera and walked around that school, and I was an advocate. I was the #1 champion of, please, we need to get behind a new South School. Nobody wanted it more than me. But how you can take a yes vote and a champion of doing a project and turn me into a no vote is just, I don't know what happened. It seems like the wheels fell off because nobody was really paying attention to, like, oh my God, wait a minute. It's just an elementary school. It just has to be new. It didn't have to be glorious in order to be safe. You talk about how decrepit it's going to be, if we don't do this. But it didn't have to be glorious to serve the students. I also want to say beyond that I get concerned about the overinvestment in the infrastructure towards the special needs of the community. And I'll tell you why. It's not because of the students who already have an IEP, the students who already are here. But it's a shift in our focus, because we used to focus on excellence. We don't see a focus on excellence. We see 80 to 90% of our time talking about special needs. And what happens when you do that, in my opinion, and I see a lot of anecdotal, if not pretty accurate statistics that bear it out, is that we were told back when the high school was coming online that it was going to change the demographics of the town to having pharmaceutical executives, white-collar jobs, families coming in, and it was going to gentrify the town in a positive way because it was going to lift everything up and all would be great. But what did it do instead? We ended up increasing the poverty level of the families who bring their students to our schools. We grew from 40 to 50%. And what did it did? It did happen. It did happen. I was at, believe me, they don't make promises, but they...
I was one of the people making promises.
It was the...
But I want to be clear about what we did and didn't represent. I'm very defensive of that project, David.
I understand that.
If you're going to criticize how we sold it,
I know...
I will stand up and defend it. Now, everything else is fair, and I apologize for my tone, but as you can tell, I'm very defensive of that point.
We were told that you need to put in a new school because it helps attract families.
Put in a new school, full stop. It was an old high school. We needed a new high school. We didn't do it for demographic change reasons, and we never told anybody that it was for that reason. We never even suggested that there would be demographic change. I want to be clear about that. I'm defensive of that project, and anybody who voted for it should be defensive. We sold that project based on openness and honesty. And you, of all people, would know that, David. I don't mean to make this personal.
What we see happen.
Dave, hang on a minute.
We talked about that
TJ's
constantly.
I'm not done with my, I think I have the floor.
David, I apologize to you.
I'm not done yet.
I got animated
What
about
happens?
that part.
What happens when we have an infrastructure that, with good intention, we all want to take care of all of our kids? Matter of fact, somebody, an expert with education once said, that all the children are special. Even the ones that go to advanced placement in high school, they're special too, but yet we carve out wings of buildings now, not just putting in, new, hiring, dozens of new special ed people to add to the infrastructure. What happens to the town like ours, the state looks at us and says, let's bring them a lot of our hardships, and we see students exiting. We see families exiting. It is on the article because this kind of infrastructure attracts a lot of the hardships that are outside of Stoughton. Instead of serving just the community who we already have, we start not only expanding the size of our town, which is we like to be welcoming. We like to bring in a balance of just where all the towns in the Commonwealth are sharing in all of the needs for special ed, not just putting a magnet on Stoughton and say, we're no longer focused on talking about excellence, we're talking about being the mecca for bringing all of the people who are challenged with IEPs. And I just want balance. I don't want it to be sacrificing excellence with just focused on just the people who have special needs. And I think it's a reasonable thing to comment on because I see these schools, I see them building infrastructure out, very focused on the needs of a very, very specific segment. And I just think that our town, yes, it needs to take care of special needs. But I don't believe we should be taking care of the special needs of every IEP student in the state of Massachusetts, which is an exaggeration of the point. But that's kind of how I feel about this kind of project.
All right, thank you very much for that, Dave. Dr. Baird, I happen to notice you had your hand up.
I just want to, I appreciate Mr. Laurie as a person who has strong opinions and perspectives, but I have to push back on a couple of things. The first one is that special education is the definition of excellence of that individual child. It's not a place to go. It's the definition of excellence. It's the equalizer of that student. In other words, the accommodation of a student in inclusion is an opportunity for them to be successful at their level and continue to become more and more excellent in that area. They still take the MCAS, they still graduate from Stoughton High School. For those students that are in severe modifications or get severe modifications, those students are students who are also striving for excellence every day and receiving services. It is no different than the striving that we try to do with our AP kids or our honors kids or our EL kids. it's very difficult to hear that we want to have a conversation about not supporting a school because of special education. In fact, we should have an argument or a discussion that strives for why Stoughton Schools does so well with special education students. That's the first part. The second part, this town is changing, and unfortunately, I wish I could speak tonight as a resident and not as the superintendent, but I'm going to stick my comments to being superintendent. We welcome all students into our public schools. It is what it is. We can like it, dislike it, so on and so forth. We have seen a tremendous shift in our demographics. I graduated from Stoughton High School in 1988. I can tell you by name in one hand how many minority students graduated with me. You walk the halls of Stoughton High School today, or our Stoughton Public Schools, 54% of our students do not define themselves as Caucasian. 54%. That number crawled over 50% in 2021. That was the first year where the Caucasian numbers became less than the 50. To that end, we are not holding up signs that say, "Come to Stoughton." I've used this in a couple of different meetings. Saturdays are my day where I can put the dog in the truck and get out for an hour, and the realty signs go up and down in 20 seconds, the number of cars outside of these homes. This is a destination place. We should be proud of that. By the way, it's the reason why any of us that are selling our homes and can move south are going with a bundle of bucks, because our home price, I would not pay today for my 3-bedroom Cape what I can get for it. I just wouldn't, because it's ridiculously priced. That said, the other part that's really important to the reasons why we have programs such as the TLC, the RISE program, the language-based classroom, the GROW program, and so on and so forth, is because we are taking students and striving them in a positive direction. And in the RISE program, actually, our students are graduating fully with full diplomas from Stoughton High School. These are students, and just so that you can get a general gist, I want you to think about a student who has a perfect math score on the MCAS in 3rd grade or 4th grade. Perfect score. And has other challenges around social dynamics. That student is academically doing better than I've ever done, because I've never received a perfect score in anything, but yet has other social dynamics. Then we have students who are in other programs who have a diaper, need to be changed, are going to be with us until they're 22 years of age. 22 years of age. We have full responsibility until then the state moves in. And that's when the wow factor really happens, because that's when all of us who have family members or know the system like I do see that those students now go into, some would say, a little bit of a lesser opportunity than what's given to them from the time they came through the door in preschool to the time they left at 22. So I just want us to make sure we can absolutely disagree on the money issue. I understand that. I have parents who live in town on fixed incomes. There'll be a wonderful debate over at 79 Gregg Road about the cost of the school. I can guarantee you my dad will be the first one. But at the end of the day, let's have that discussion and less about a classroom and excellence.
Yeah, I'd like to just comment, Vaughn. I was not talking about Caucasians, and I wouldn't have any problem with, the town, instead of being 30% minority, to having 70% minority. It really has nothing to do with my comments about the changing demographic. I'm talking about economics. We talk about the need to handle the budget, the property taxes, all the things that are needed. You need to have a balance. You're going to have the low incomes, you're going to have the middle incomes, the higher incomes, but the shift is changed in such a way that everybody, and believe me, it was talked about, if you put in things like a new school and the sewer and this and that, of these investments, we're going to change the town in such a way that it was going to make it so that our tax base was going to go greater, so that our burden per taxpayer was going to go down. That was the nature of those discussions, and it was real. That discussion did happen, but not about, the ethnicity of anybody. I am totally good at, believe me, I know, matter of fact, living in this town, folks who are close to my family who are not the same skin color as me, and they make a lot more money than me. So it has nothing to do with, my relationship with people of a different skin color. It's just about making sure that the town doesn't just keep just going into a direction of socioeconomics that are actually going in the direction it's not balanced. It should be a balance of families coming in and maintaining a certain, we shouldn't be just like spiraling into taking more and more state aid, more and more grant money, and then all of a sudden it just kind of keeps spiraling into such a way that we're losing control over exactly what kind of a town we have, because it's no longer a humble town where we're serving just the people who live here, but we're actually creating such cost in our town where it drives out the people who live here, and we don't really know who's moving in. Okay. It's just a changeover, a dramatic changeover in terms of who we are.
Okay, Dave, I'm going to take a question from Elliot. Elliot, you have a question?
I do, in
Thank you.
fact. First of all, I'd like to praise my fellow benevolent Vice President here, President, for kind comments and asking questions that I was going to ask. And Lisa, thank you for your questions, and thank you for clarifying your demographics. I only have one question here. In the financial statement here we have, this town has a habit of taking on projects that were not properly supervised, we'll say. All right? Now, the high school so far seems to be just a gem, and the credit to the architects and et al. For coming up with it, and TJ for supervising and keeping all this together. Thank you very much. The one question I have is, in lieu of some of them things like the fire department and the police department and the so-called buildings there, and I remember the junior high, I think it was the junior high, the ceiling collapsed on it while it was occupied due to lack of supervision or the architect, not the architect, well, maybe it was the architects, I don't know. I don't know where the blame goes, where the finger should be pointed, but what's important is this. Will this project be bonded, and for how long, so that we don't end up in that same situation again?
Well, this project is being approached the same way as the high school, in the sense that we have a construction management firm we're going to procure over the next couple of months if it's successful. They will be bonded. They will certainly have a surety bond, but they'll also be pre-qualified at the highest level of quality and performance and a track record. So I can tell you now, this will be managed at the same level of quality as the high school and the same level of diligence, and there'll be no difference between the way we approach this project and the high school.
And are those bondings just included in that price?
Yes, yeah, that's in the number, yeah.
Price also. Part of doing Tim can talk about this better than I could. Part of going with a construction manager at risk, will enter into an agreement for guaranteed maximum price.
All right, thank you for that. Joel.
Actually, this question was for the town engineer, but we couldn't get an answer from him, so I'm going to ask you guys. Currently, Carl, could you put up the site plan again so that we can see how the site looks? That's right there. That's good. currently we have a driveway that comes in off of Park Street, and cars go in and out, and buses go in, they drop people off, they come back and they come out. At some point in time, I know TJ and I talked on the phone once, this was a while ago, about actually doing a brand-new road, a town road that went from Park Street to Sumner Street. Okay? And then the school would be right off the town road. Now, the other idea that occurred to me that I was hoping the town engineer could address, but he said you guys will have to address, is instead of going with a town road that goes all the way to Sumner Street, is it feasible to have the road come in, take a sharp left, and go through the school property right by the existing South Elementary School and end up on Ash Street? Are you guys looking at that at all? I guess maybe I have to tell you, Carl, too.
We're not looking at that currently, Joel. It's not town property. There's private property in between this current, line
TJ said he
oversight
could
and
fix
stuff.
that.
There were discussions with the owners of what's called Fano Drive, but those discussions didn't prove fruitful and not in the time period necessary. So that's why there's the access directly off Park Street to this property.
So we're just going to stay with the driveway concept and
Right.
not a road. That's too bad. Okay.
All right, thank you very much for that. Okay. No other questions? Then, Eric. Excellent to hear from you, Eric. You have a question?
Just want to wrap with a very serious question, I presume that this will be the Walsh Elementary School, yes? This will be the Walsh Elementary School, I'm presuming, and I just want to pander as much as I can while I have the opportunity, that's all.
Thank you very much, Eric. Lauren, you have a question?
I remembered Cynthia. This is just a curiosity question. So the South School, I was told that it was not a safe school at this point. Is that correct?
So we have to look at safety for a couple of different perspectives, right? In terms of, its connection to fire and all that stuff, we're at code, we meet code and all that stuff. I think what we're really talking about is, and one of the reasons why a addition renovation project really isn't considered is you got to remember that these are schools that have internal walls that are asbestos, for example, and all of those types of hot topics that we always have to, and we have to have an action plan for that stuff. And that's one of the reasons why actually considering any type of addition would have been, or renovation addition would have been potentially significantly costly, because we would have had to look at things like modular classrooms. In other words, move kids out, fix a section, move kids back in, so on and so forth. So defining safety, the place is safe for kids to go, the staff to go, air quality and all that are things that we're constantly running to check on an older building. That's just something that we do. In terms of inside to outside, it's safe. It's no longer productive, if you will, for continuation of 21st century learning. That's really what it really comes down to. You walk down the hallway, you got wires hanging all over the place because we're not going into walls. So if you need new phone lines, new electrical outlets and all of that, they're all standing out, not in walls and so on and so forth, just because we don't want to get in behind walls at all.
Okay. So it's safe if you guys decide to use the South School for something else? That's possible.
In terms of safe, yes. In terms of its actual use,
yeah.
I would say no, not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, I don't see any other questions here, so no other questions? I've got a couple of questions. It's mentioned in here, I think it's on maybe page 10, about the LEED silver, and you mentioned possibly LEED gold. If LEED gold is achieved, what is the percentage to gain on that?
Can you explain that? Sorry, I don't know what
Luckily,
that is.
he'll explain it for us right now.
So LEED is the organization that sort of certifies schools for sustainability and for how well they are energy efficient and deal with their resources in a way that's very sustainable. So you have different gradations of LEED, so you can be LEED certified, which is the base level, or you can be LEED silver, gold, or platinum, which is the highest. LEED, the reason why we target LEED silver is that under the MSBA reimbursement formula, if you achieve LEED silver, which is determined by this point system of how sustainable you are, you receive 4 extra points of reimbursement. You receive 4 extra percentage reimbursement. So it doesn't get you more to achieve LEED gold or platinum. We would only achieve LEED gold primarily because we always shoot to make sure we achieve LEED silver, and sometimes we're able to, with that buffer, get.
So if you achieve gold, there's no extra points?
There's no extra reimbursement.
That was really my question. I wanted to find out about that. As far as energy efficient rebates, that'll be researched?
Yeah, there's some, well, and Carl alluded to this, there's some pretty significant rebates now we took on the Inflation Reduction Act for geothermal that could be significantly, in the 6 to 7 figure range. And so we are pursuing those for other schools, and we would pursue them obviously in Stoughton. That money is appropriated in there.
I saw the geothermal on there. I found.
And then there's other rebates that are through Mass Eversource and Mass Save and National Grid. Yeah, I'm sorry, National Grid here.
Okay, and all that'll be researched. Any
Yes.
rebates? Okay, that was really. I just wanted to.
And we
find
don't
out.
include that in the pro forma you see here in terms of helping with the budget because they're not in hand yet, and we don't want to overpromise on them. But
Theoretically speaking, the project cost could be brought down through rebates through
they definitely will be
the energy companies and that sort of thing. So if you do all that homework and hit up the utility companies, you might save the taxpayers some more money on this thing.
Yes,
Is that correct? All right.
Significant sums now.
Okay, because if we can save some money, that'd be great. The high school come in how much under budget?
The high school came in about $5 million, $6 million. I thought it was $5
million under budget.
And that was after adding in some things that needed to be done,
And that committee did a nice job.
Yeah, surprise and.
Okay. So, all right, that was my question about the geothermal and the LEED. That was about it. Yes, Lisa.
Along your lines of sustainability, has anybody looked into Nikola Tesla's form of energy? Just curious.
Well, I don't know if there's a lot going on with the battery. There is a lot going on with battery storage, but I'm not sure that.
I think it's a different question.
Yeah, no, that's not battery.
John, did you have something here?
Just to be clear, I know you can't overlap another school if we do take on this project. So how bad is, just so I'm clear, or maybe if people at home are clear, how bad is the O'Donnell Middle School? Like, what if that does get really bad and then that needs to be added in? There's no way of doing that if we've already got other projects, including this one.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've asked the committee to support me with, and they've given the blessing, is we're putting together a very strategic capital plan for the school department. We are not going to be in this year-to-year ballgame. We want to take a look at what are all of our needs and then say, go after this, go after this, go after that. The O'Donnell Middle School, I think, if we're looking, let's just say through the school committee, they're the policymakers, let's say they make a decision that the SOI is going to be when a school is coming off or closer to when a school is coming off. Then I think what we would see is some line items within the middle school's needs to make sure that we don't get worse, if you will, that we maintain what we have. And those would be true capital item type issues, not cosmetic type issues.
Okay, but like what I'm thinking of more is, I appreciate that answer, but I'm thinking of more like, well, you're hoping that it's going to be okay or sustainable until a certain point, but emergencies happen. We didn't expect a flood here, different things. That's what I'm saying. It's unforeseen. That's
right. So some of the unforeseens would be covered by things like our insurance. right? So if let's just take Mr. Hanson's comment, let's say that bonding had all been done correctly and so on and so forth, and everything was uppity up, and there was a flood, we would utilize whatever our deductible is, pay our deductible, make our claim, get it fixed. The biggest issues that I can see that are short-term things that we have to keep an eye on are always going to be around boilers, heating. Those are always the key to. In terms of fire sustainability and all that, that's a requirement to open the building. So that's coded. I don't can't do anything. If, for a matter of fact, we had lights go out one of these earlier this year, and we had to make sure that and it went after the school day. So we went right into emergency protocol, including that if we were going to open in the morning and or overnight, we didn't have emergency response, we'd have to put a fireman there, and pay for that detail to be there, because that's the law, that's the requirement. So I hope I know you'll see, if you're a member of the FinCom, you'll see a capital plan for this fall coming from the school department, looking at issues such as the middle school are going to be at the top of that list. Again, within reason and over time, because if let's say we're 10 years out to Dave's comment, or 12 years out, then there are things we have to do now that can't wait 12 years. The problem is, if it's $800,000, do you spend it? Those are the big questions that FinCom and others above my pay grade will have to make.
All right, Lisa, did you have a question?
Yeah, just to follow up on your, thank you very much for capital, like a long-term outlook. So for the school committee, but from my position, I'm also looking to see that in conjunction with, are you working with Tom Coulter, our town manager?
So we have,
because
yes.
we have police, we have other infrastructure.
Yeah, so I come from a very different approach to capital planning for the last 10 years, where we had a capital plan committee consisting of two finance committee members and joint appointments by the school committee and select board, who would make the recommendations to FinCom on how to spend capital money. And so we would have one article. So I wouldn't have a vestibule article and a marking article and a safety article, and you get to vote on all those. It's basically vetted, and it's one article, and you up or down the article, or you make an amendment to the article. That's not the way we do things here. So here, what Tom and I have talked about, and Mark actually, is we've said that we want to incorporate within the town capital plan, there's the school department, and we would put our 5-year capital plan in there and make an argument for our top 3 items every year, or the most important item. That's the idea.
Ideally, I'd like to see everyone working together to your turn, my turn.
We've asked the select board for a working group or something to work together on the capital plan. Have yet to hear from them.
Right. Elliot, did you have a question?
Just a very brief one. I know we got a lot of problems apparently with the O'Donnell Middle School. Is there anything that you have in writing that you can give to the Finance Committee so we have an advance warning of what's to come? A crystal ball.
I can send you. I can send you the entire 2023 facilities master plan. The financial numbers all there would need to be upgraded, but it gives you the items, and it's a pretty long list of items. It's just the financials would not be accurate, but I'm happy to send that to the chair to distribute to the committee.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Joel.
I just have a short comment. One of the things about the high school was, much to my unhappy feeling, we ended up having to do some change orders that increased the security of the high school, not only physically in terms of the outside, but also electronically with different types of systems and so forth and so on. All of those measures on the high school were discussed in executive meetings, because we didn't want everybody in the world to know what we were doing to enhance the security at the high school. Okay? So the only reason I bring this up is that I'm asking TJ, your committee, to kind of take a look at that. I don't think it's something that you want to put on the general plans when they go out for bid, because then anybody could grab the plans and find out exactly what the enhanced security items were. So in this budget, Tim, I'm hoping that you have enough money in the change order contingency to address those.
Yeah, we have accommodated some kind of basic practice type stuff. Carl's team has met with the public safety people, but obviously if something comes up, we have plenty of contingency for that effect, for that issue.
All right, any questions, comments from the committee? No? You have one more, John?
I was just curious, being a three-story building and with the access, have our public safety officials had a shot at this just to make sure everything was cool with them?
They have.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any questions or comments? Hearing no more from the committee. No more questions, comments from the committee. Do we have any questions or comments from the public? Cynthia Walsh, please identify yourself for the record.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I'm going to speak for the entire audience. There's a couple of things about me and my family. I've spent 42 years in the Stoughton Public Schools as a student and as a teacher at the Jones Elementary School. My family's been in town for 5 generations, and that's good news. The bad news is that special needs run in families. In my family, it's dyslexia, autism, speech and language disorders, ADHD, and hearing loss or need for special ed for hearing. We didn't move to Stoughton to burden the school system. And for years, those conditions were ignored, or you were sent home. There is no place for you here. And then we had the magic of 766. And all of a sudden, my family members started receiving the help they needed. They're not in prison. They're not homeless. They're not on welfare. They're earning, in one case, more money than I did when I was a teacher. All they needed was a leg up. They needed a hand. They needed special education. And they did pass the MCAS, and they did get their high school diplomas. I don't like the idea that these kids are freaks. They're not worthy. That's wrong. And as a previous speaker kind of alluded to, in my family, when you go to a Walsh family reunion, there are people of color there. Because the younger folks in our family have spread their wings, and they're not looking for that good Irish girl or that good Irish boy. Many of them have served our country. And when you are in the military, boy, do you get to know everybody from everywhere. And in some cases, you like them, you love them, and you marry them, and you have kids. And they get accepted. Maybe the older generation goes, in my day, well, it ain't your day anymore. And you either sit down at the table and eat with these folks or go to McDonald's. As to the South School, I was there when it opened. I was in the 6th grade. And to tell you how old I am, my 6th grade teacher was Helen Hansen. Yeah. We are now on the 3rd generation of Walshes at the South School. 2 of my grandnieces, one in kindergarten, one in 1st grade. And now my question, well, one more comment. I can't tell you how much I resent paying extra money on my property taxes for a high school that is about as accessible to me as Mount Everest. So my questions about this school, where I will probably be voting because I'm for precinct 3. The present South School is a nightmare. Besides having a mobility impairment, a hearing impairment, a vision impairment, I have congestive heart failure. That means I can only walk a short distance before I have to stop and rest and then continue. The present South School has no railings. So if I was in a wheelchair, I'd be fine. But when I need to stop and rest, or even to get guided to the doorway, there's nothing there. And it's a long walk from the driveway into the building, and then I've got to go into the cafetorium to vote. It's not going to keep me from voting, but it makes voting pretty exhausting. Now, the new South School, I heard that there's a shorter entrance to the gymnasium, which is probably where the voting would be. Is there a picture of that? And because I've already said previously, I cannot see the screens, I will. You do have it? So where, what number is the gym? 15?
18 and 17.
18 and 17. So there's 2 ways in, is that what you're saying? Well, what's the shortest way in?
18.
Okay. So that's my problem with the high school. There's no railings on any of the entrances. And I can't tell from this, there's probably no railings going to be in here either. I mean, I'm not the only person in Stoughton who has issues. And a lot of the students will have parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles who have issues. We need to be able to get into the building without collapsing or calling 911. What is the shortest way into the gym? And
through you, Mr. Chairman, if those who can see the screen here, my pointer, there's
I can see the pointer.
There's handicap parking right here.
Okay.
Those are the closest spaces. The entrance to the gym is right there.
Yeah.
That's about 60 feet, and it's flat.
Well,
but even along
flat helps if I fall on my face.
Flat helps. I mean, your point helps that we can consider railings even on those locations. Sure.
I mean, the South School, I kind of hug, there's a stone wall I hug.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I've asked the select board, at least when they have building committees, someone with a disability, it doesn't have to be as many as mine, or someone from the Commission on Disabilities should be on these building committees. Because I've said this myself, until 4 years ago, I didn't really pay that much attention to accessibility. And then Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and she's never recovered. And her health has gotten worse and worse and worse. And now I really have to pay attention, getting to these meetings and getting home from these meetings. Anyone who's brought me home knows I literally have to be guided to the door. I can't see the door to my own house in the dark. Someone has to assist me. And I'm not the only person in town that has a disability. Thank you for listening to my rant.
Thank you very much, Cynthia.
Vaughn.
Yes, Lisa?
May I just make one brief comment about something I've heard? I want to, for anybody who's on a committee in this town or in prep for upcoming town meeting, that when somebody's bringing out a valid point, that subsequent speakers don't try to disparage them or twist their points around.
I call it clarifying.
Okay, you may call it clarifying, but I think you misinterpreted Dave's
We
point.
are not
and
going
that's
to
a
have.
concern of
We're
mine.
not going to go back and forth with the public. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Dr. Baeta?
Yeah, I just wanted to put out there that at the end of this month, on Monday, the 29th, the South School will have to all town meeting, and of course, most of you are town meeting members, but finance committee members, the general public, we're going to have the building open at 6:30 for a physical tour, as well as a continuing of presentation of this PowerPoint, probably updated and shorter and briefer, but those, so that people can physically see the South School for those who haven't been there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Could you repeat the date again?
That'll be Monday, April 29th at 6:30 PM at the South School.
Thank you.
Cookies will be served.
Oh,
Cookies, all right.
Wow.
Cookies, all right, thank you. And thank you.
Vaughn,
for that.
there's one more date. Sorry. One more date that's important. That debt meeting for the 9th
It's
has
been
been
canceled.
canceled. I
Yep.
just want
Yeah,
the
I
public
got the
to
email
know.
about that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the offer on cookies.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Motion and a second. Elliot gets a second that time.
Elliot got that one.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Public hearing is hereby closed.
Since if we want to discuss this, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the motion in the special town meeting warrant with the exception of reducing the amount by $1 million.
Second.
So it would be 113,407,888.
Is that how you want to actually state it that way?
Excuse me?
Is that I agree with you on the motion, but is that how you
My
really?
motion is that we approve the motion as printed in the special town meeting warrant with the exception would change the number to 113,407,888, and Laura jumped in and seconded it.
Okay, that I agree to. Okay.
Okay, motion and a second.
Yeah, discussion allowed?
Yes,
or
I was
not?
just going to call for discussion, and then you raise your hand. Yes, Dave.
Just trying to follow the progression that you
Thank
have,
you.
Vaughn. Thank you. So the motion as it's written is being, there were questions that came up about that. So we're going to vote on it as it's written. Now, how do we handle any changes that happen over time? Are we going to then re-vote a change in the motion if one should happen?
What
Because
changes would
there's-
happen?
The change might be where some of the debt moves inside the budget. So if that conversation happens and it's agreed upon by the people who have an interest in that,
On. If the article says, or take any other action relative to thereto, then in fact, you can reduce that with simply stating that that $1 million for the feasibility study has already been spent.
Thank you, Elliot.
well, that covers that. But now, what I'm talking about, on one hand, I don't see any problem where the MSBA would really care about how we split out our portion of debt, because it's our portion. It's not anything to do with the state. They're just giving us money. We don't care. Why would they care? But on the other hand, there was this whole thing, as the vice chair pointed out, where there had to be this special language added at the last minute, where the finance committee never had a chance to look at, and it was just inserted on the floor at town meeting, and that was kind of a fiasco. What path are we going in, or do we not really have to take one because somehow it'll just magically happen that some number might appear inside the budget instead of excluded?
Well, that would be something the select board would probably chime into later on, I would think.
Could we include it here, Vaughn, through
No.
you?
I would not touch the motion because I would not know exactly how to write it. And as they said, the MSBA is very specific. They actually give you a template basically to fill out on what you need for a motion. Now, I have already sent, as they were talking, I did send a message off to the town manager, the assistant town manager, to the finance director, so forth, to ask if in fact this motion had been vetted by both town council and bond council, because I thought they said it had been, but I'm not positive. I think it was out at some point in time when we had the annual town meeting warrant. Those had been done, and I think they told me that this one was out being done, but it's the only one we have in front of us. So
Could we
because
delay
of
the vote until we have that answer?
because of, well, let's put it this way. The book is going to print Friday, okay? There's no time. So as I mentioned during the meeting, as we saw back when they were doing that fire station, a motion was put on the table that night that was quite a bit different than what was discussed during every public hearing for that project. And it came in that night, there was a number of changes to it, a large number, enough that I thought the moderator should not have allowed it because there was that much of a change, my opinion. I'm not the moderator, so he chose to let it come in. Didn't even follow his rules being in 24 hours ahead or 48 hours ahead. It came in that night. So we can certainly, anybody can try and find out if they want to put an alternate motion on the floor, as long as it's submitted in a timely fashion. It could certainly be done, and as long as you know it's, it would have to go through to make sure that it's proper form.
Yeah, so can I add to?
I mean, that would be what I would suggest for now.
I see it as two different ways we could do this. It's just my opinion. One is if we voted yes, put in a recommendation with the affirmative to say we would like the consideration of an evaluation and then a language change looked at by council for possibly doing that. And then on the other hand, if you have a minority of no votes, maybe because of this problem, there might be people who say no, could put in a recommendation as the minority no vote to say this is why we said no to it.
This is kind of beyond the scope of the article. I mean, I think if the select board wants to chime in later on and say, hey, we can do a split because we don't.
We're a recommending body, Vaughn.
Thank you for reminding me.
I know, but it seems
Dave,
like
shouldn't we
it's
just be
perfectly inherent to this.
Shouldn't we be just recommending what's in front of us, either yes or no? If you want to put a little.
We have the ability to say what we think is right for the taxpayers in this very article about how it gets borrowed again.
But we have a boilerplate thing that the MSBA puts forward.
We make
Dr. Byetta?
recommendations to the select board.
Okay. Okay. Joel?
Well, first of all, I agree with the article as the motion as prepared, but I also agree somewhat with Dave about this. I took a look at the motion, and if I understand the motion correctly, it doesn't stipulate that the only way you can fund this is through a debt exclusion. It just says you can use a debt exclusion to fund this. So my interpretation of the motion is as Dave has mentioned before, if you wanted to, or if the town wanted to, they could use a combination of debt exclusion and bond that would be carried as part of the levy. Now, there's a couple ways of doing this. The way the town decided to do it on the fire station project is they stipulated right in the motion would be a 35-65% split. The problem with that is that on this motion, if we alter the motion such like that, I'm pretty sure that MSBA will come back and say, the motion's not good enough, we're not interested, we're not going to go forward.
That's exactly why I wanted to do it carefully, not just.
My feeling is that one of the ways we could take a look at it is from a cash flow perspective. Something, is TJ still? Yeah, there he is. TJ said about the high school, which is what I remember too. We originally came up with the idea of funding it through, and I think you call it special points where you reached a certain point and you only funded up to that point and so on and so on, or
the various milestones.
Milestone, thank you, that's the word I was looking for. So technically, for example, you could say in the first fiscal year of the project, we're going to expend $8 million. I'm just coming up with a number. That $8 million, the select board could say, oh, you know what, why don't we put that as part of the levy? And then after we expend that, we can take a look and see if we want to include more in the levy or whether we want to go to full debt exclusion. I mean, there's a variety of ways we can do it.
Yeah, but as long as that conversation is going on, that's positive because everybody's a winner. I think the petitioners would love it because it helps them with their, statement that this is a positive thing. And look what we've done is we've taken a little bit off of the exclusion portion.
Well, I'm not in disagreement with you. I think that what maybe, Vaughn, the idea is that maybe we just make an anecdotal recommendation as part of when you read the motion, say that we decided that we go forward with this, but we also would recommend that we take a look at this and this and this and let the town meeting decide what they want to do. I don't think that there would be a floor motion to really make any significant change to that, to be honest with you, because once again, the minute you screw around with the MSBA motion, the MSBA gets cranky.
We're not going to lose a bunch of money by screwing around with the motion.
Okay.
Dr. Baeta?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to the members. I just want to remind, after doing this for a while, the simple vote that MSBA is looking for is an appropriations vote. Pure and simple. How you decide in this process to go 2/3, 1/3 to, because the number's going to change. We heard tonight that we're going after all kinds of benefit rate money that's going to change this bottom number to a positive, to less money. So the 113 is going to come down because we're going after all these special stuff that's out there. So just to be mindful, and again, if you decide to say as a finance committee, we want to, we are also recommending to look at all options of how we're going to ABC, I think that's totally fine. But the motion is to appropriate the bottom number, 113 million. How you get to how you decide that we're going to pay it is that's the intertwining of what happens. It happens in every project that takes place. And so if the Finance Committee then chooses to say, well, we want to make sure that considerations for X, Y, Z, and you have that vote, then you put it in there because the town fathers are the ones that are going to have to decide that, not us. I just want to be mindful that changing anything with the MSBA could hurt this project. Thank you.
Lisa.
So thank you for that, Dr. Baeta. I also want to be mindful to remember our task here as a finance committee. We are a recommending body. That's it. For us not to make prudent recommendations and to scare, we might lose MBTA, MB, whatever the initials are, sorry. Thank you, MSBA. The bottom line is we're trying, the point is we're trying to recommend something fiscally prudent that could also benefit the petitioners here. I don't understand what any resistance would be, and thank you for Joel for understanding Dave's point at least. So I would like to see that recommendation be incorporated somehow in this.
We would have to do that on another motion, second, and a vote that's separate than this motion that we're discussing.
Okay. I understand, to your point, John, that we don't have counsel here. So this is my concern as a finance committee member. When this is I think we could all agree, this is a significant amount of money. It's actually $114,000. We've already spent the $1 million, I believe. What did I say? Oh my God, 114 million, sorry. Thank you for the correction. That we don't just blow through town council and we don't abdicate our responsibility to make recommendations. So thank you for hearing me on that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm not looking to abdicate anything. I listened to the presentation. During that presentation, they told you what the cost would be. If you did not approve this, you're going to have to renovate the building anyway, and it's going to be at a significant cost. So since I was on the board 10 years ago, when they chose to do the high school, because it was being threatened with losing accreditation, yet the South School was in a physically worse condition than the high school. But they had to forego it, and they've been doing shoestring and bubble gum to keep these schools going. So I'm not abdicating anything. I take my responsibility here very seriously. And to a point, I came in here tonight opposed to this because I just don't think the people could afford it. And I don't know if it'll go through a vote or not. But after listening to everything tonight, I've changed my mind. And I'm going to recommend that we go ahead with this. That's why I made the motion.
Okay, to follow up, as a follow-up to that, that is an example of what I meant about twisting words, okay? So my point is abdicating our responsibility for a recommendation.
I made my recommendation. That's my recommendation. That's what we're discussing. That's what's going to be voted on.
And I'm making a further recommendation that the committee consider. Don't forget our fire stations, they went 100 years in a deplorable
So did the high
conditions.
school.
Okay,
So,
exactly. So again, it does matter what the taxpayers can bear
Yes, it
for
does.
projects.
It does.
Okay, so I'm just saying that we should consider within this motion, to Dave's point earlier, the MSBA.
I am not going to change my motion. That's the discussion in the vote now, and I'm
So
not
would
going
you
to
like me
change the
to make the
motion.
motion? I'll make a motion to add.
You have a motion and a second on the floor
motion and a
now.
second on the, we have a motion and a second
You
now.
vote that first, you want to make another one?
Okay, I'll
be
wait.
more than happy to sit and discuss.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
John, can you restate your motion for us, please?
Can I? Sure. The motion I made was to approve the motion as written in the warrant with the exception of the amount being reduced by the $1 million. So it would be down to $113,407,888. And that was seconded by Ms. Gunn over here to my left.
So to clarify, can you clarify for myself and the audience again what that 1 million reduction is? Thank you.
The town meeting approved a $1 million appropriation for a feasibility study. That $1 million is included in the 114 that we had before us.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wolk brought up that fact, and they said, oh, yeah, no, you should reduce it by the 1 million. And so it's already been appropriated and spent, and now we're...
Nice catch by Mr. Wolk.
Nice catch by Mr. Wolk.
Saving the taxpayers $1 million.
And you're not getting the 10% finder's fee.
Okay, motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion on this? No? Okay. All in favor? Okay.
Okay.
Let's write this down.
We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All opposed?
3. See, I knew that because I saw the ones that didn't go up, so I knew there was 10. Pretty good. Hey, it's all in the math.
So
That's why I'm
Vaughn,
on
through
the
you,
finance
would I make that motion now, or could you, I don't know the process.
Yes, this would be the time to ask him to
Okay,
recommend.
so I would just like to make a
Yes,
motion.
Lisa?
I would just like to make a motion to accept the article as written with the modification of in having 2/3 be debt.
Wait, so the motion has already been voted to accept the article. If you're looking to put a notation in for a recommendation of the Finance Committee, I think you needed to state it that way. The motion itself has already been voted that.
Okay, so I'd like to make a.
Do you want to make a motion to explore all funding options, or you want to get specific?
That's a good
I
question.
think I
That's a
would
good
like to.
question. Yeah.
Maybe they want to take $5 million out of something.
On one hand,
I defer to a veteran.
well, on one hand, we could just use the same model as the fire station and just say, we did it for municipal, we're doing it for school, and just do it on that kind of philosophical basis. On the other hand, somebody could talk to us about, the people who are we actually have a financial advisor, believe it or not. Our town actually hires one, and they give us advice on stuff and how things impact things, and kind of looks at our underlying financials.
Okay,
and
I'll
that's a
defer
different
to your
way.
recommendation.
Is it possible that maybe we don't even want to have a second motion on this thing, and we just want to kind of ask the the select board, hey, have you guys considered all funding options without a specific motion?
Would that be as a note? How do you do that?
How do you
This
do
is
that
all-
without a recommendation?
Right,
How
I
do you
would
do that?
want to make
Asking,
it,
I'm just throwing options
Yeah,
out.
I
he's
think it
just-
should be a recommendation. We think that a review of what options are available based on our debt inside the budget compared to what we already have for debt outside the budget, to take a look at it to see whether or not it's whether it's,
what's the most
word?
prudent fiscally?
Prudent's a good word. Well, not knowing is not an excuse for not reviewing. We have to go forward with the need to know and establish that number so we can.
It's getting a bit ambiguous, though. So do we have an actual motion?
Here's what I do think, after we do settle on that, is that we will need another finance committee meeting before town meeting so that we could actually talk about what came back from select board and whoever else was
And
involved
from
with
that financial meeting, because that's what I'm looking to do as a finance committee based on the handbook. Our task is to present to town meeting the best recommendation, and we need that input. So as the chair and other veterans, I mean, I'm amenable to discuss what is the best way to do that. My goal is to have us be ready to present something to the town meeting reps, which is we're a recommending body. I want to have that information.
The select board would handle that funding, though. I mean, because this authorizes the select board in here, so.
Lisa, it might be wise to go to a select board meeting or write them, an email or something that they can, if they have any other options for payment or the way they want to borrow this money.
So my concern
So then
is,
have
I hear what
a
you're
finance
saying.
committee meeting.
Through you, Vaughn. So I hear what you're saying. My concern is we are the recommending body to town meeting from what I'm reading. So I want to go to town meeting with a prudent recommendation. So even something as simple as saying, if I could, Vaughn, if you agree, to say something to the effect that we as the finance committee would like a report made at town meeting for what are the best financing options available to the town on this project.
Well, I don't know that we would request a report.
A presentation,
You would actually ask for this. You would
an
actually
answer.
from-
Dave, I'm sorry. Dave's.
Yeah. We'd have to find out.
Can I help? I'd like to help on this. Look.
Mark had a question. Mark had a question.
I'm
Mark's
sorry.
had his hand
Go
up.
ahead.
Mark.
Yeah, just kind of a point of order on this. Are we discussing right now a notation for the no's or the yeses, or is this a notation from the whole entire finance committee?
I'm still trying to find out what we're
Right,
actually after.
That's what I
would
wanted
like to have
to
a
add.
clarification on that, because if it's the no's that want to put in a notation, or if it's the yeses.
No, I don't.
Eric, did you have a question or a comment?
More of a comment. I think at the end of when the borrowing has to happen, correct me if I'm wrong, it will be up to the select board to structure that borrowing.
Yes.
Until they have determined how they want to structure their borrowing, there is really nothing in that regard for us to recommend.
Correct.
Is my feeling at the moment. I feel like we've recommended on the total, and that was what was presented. My expectation is that when the borrowing has to happen, select board will decide how they want to structure that. Then we will have something to recommend in that regard. Do we feel like that's correct, based on memory?
No.
I think that's what I was trying to say, Eric, but you said
Okay,
it much
similar sort of
much better.
thing.
We just voted.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion that was just passed, that motion that goes forward authorizes the select board to do this. So we've already authorized them to go forward with the thing.
So they won't even necessarily need a second a review, if you will, from us in terms of how they structure that borrowing.
I wouldn't think so, because the motion gives them that authority to move forward with it.
Right. So that's why I'm saying I'm not sure that there's anything further for us to recommend.
I would hope
at
that
this time.
they would come up with the most favorable conditions for the taxpayers at this
And even further, because I recall several options were presented during the fire, station job. I will at least say, just in my humility, I don't know the calculations that go into determining the optimal balance of levy to debt exclusion. I'm not trusting myself to even begin to make a judgment on that calculation, certainly not in the state that I'm in at this point tonight. So I'm not going to involve myself in that any further, respectfully, because you are correct. We want to find that optimal balance. But again, I know it is their responsibility to determine it, and it is far more complicated than anything we're going to figure out tonight. And I'll just go ahead and leave it at that.
And I agree with you. Dave?
I think both modes of communicating to the select board are correct. You could tell all of us, hey, anybody who feels like going to the select board meeting and walk up to citizen comments and make a suggestion, they would listen to it, might take it, they might not. On the other hand, the finance committee can say, if the previous speaker would actually make it as a motion, I would be happy to second if it was framed as, we just want you to review it, because we don't, when they see the vote and it's 10-3, all they're saying is they voted thumbs up, go for it as is. No change, no other considerations, no other even analysis about it. Just send it to the townwide vote. That's how they would look at it, because they don't have any information that suggests they should review whether it's going to be inside the budget or outside as an excluded debt. They don't know that.
Well, they might
until
be watching
we transmit that. They're not watching the meeting. They're, unless they feel like watching it. But that doesn't mean they're going to bring it up or even putting it on an agenda.
Okay.
If we make a recommendation as a body, it almost says to them, hey, the Finance Committee made a formal vote. There's 13 of them that think we should take a look at it, and we should bring in our financial advisor to maybe take a look at how we can make it interesting to the voters.
That's how I'd like to do it.
Yeah.
Well,
I would like to make that motion. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I believe that they are probably already discussing this with the financial advisor and the.
Okay, but I would like to make that motion
You want
to
me to-
continue it, to make the motion, to go ahead.
Yes, Lisa?
And add that, thank you, add that motion that we are asking the select board to look at the best options in terms of how much of the debt could be considered inside the budget versus outside the budget.
Second.
Okay, what exactly is the motion? We're going to ask the select board to.
The no votes, I don't know how you want to word it, John, the no votes.
Oh, no. You're making a motion. You're going to tell me
Okay.
what you want added in here as a note. And then if you're making the motion, it's going to have to be voted to be put in. But
Okay. So I would like to make a motion
this is why I asked you to write things down, because I don't.
to ask the select board to review what debt could be included inside the budget versus what would be outside the budget, which would increase everybody's taxes in the town.
Yeah, and I second it. And by the way, this doesn't have to be in the warrant either. This could be just a recommendation we're asking them to do.
Well, theoretically, we
Regardless.
could just send an email and ask
Well,
this, but I mean.
no, but-
I think we're kind of.
I don't know, because,
The
no, we
reason
were
I'm
going to
making-
ignore the
Okay,
topic
let's-
unless one of us went to a select board meeting and made a citizen comment. That's kind of where we were with it.
Okay, so you're saying we
Excuse
don't
me?
need to put it in the warrant, you just want to send a question to
Send
the.
a recommendation to the select board and say, please review the options available for.
Mr. Andavino, what was that motion? Can you read it back?
What I'm writing down was to ask the select board what amount of this debt could be inside the budget.
I think that would be it.
And
Okay.
if you want, I could say similar to the fire station being.
Yes, please, John, please. And just so that you know.
Hang on, so
it's-
that's the motion, right?
Similar
Yes.
to-
That's the motion. So,
Yeah.
Similar to
Okay.
the fire.
Dave, you second it. We're not going to confuse this by a bunch of other stuff.
Okay.
You have the motion,
Okay.
it's written down, we know what the motion is, right? Any discussion? Lauren?
So that was Lisa and David. Okay.
Isn't that the whole point of the select board? Like,
Yes.
wouldn't that
yes.
just be common sense?
Through you, Vaughn.
Hang on a second.
Through
Hang on
you.
a second.
I'm just asking a question because that's the whole, they're policymakers, the decision, that's their job, correct?
Yes.
One would like to
Okay,
believe.
Lisa?
through you, Vaughn, the reason I'm making it is because as a finance committee, we're a recommending body to town meeting, and I want town meeting to know we're looking out for the taxpayers.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this? Diane?
But this is to go to the select board.
Yes. That was the motion.
Okay, and that's what I want to bring up to you. If this is not going to be in the warrant at all,
Well,
I don't know how.
I'm asking.
And the second part of that is, you want the selectmen to, or the select board to have this kind of information before we get to town meeting? Because I honestly don't know if they would.
Thank you. Through you, Vaughn, thank you for asking the question. My intention is not only to bring this up to the select board, but it be noted at town meeting. I'm sorry, I thought I said that a few times. I do, you know how, Vaughn, you and John sit up at the front there and you read the articles and then you make a comment. We did this in the fall. Town meeting as well. My intention is to add something to this effect. The finance committee asked the select board to do this and it be noted to the town meeting reps. I'm not just doing this outside of the town meeting. I'm doing it as the finance committee is a recommending board, town meeting reps.
I'm going to take a question for Elliot.
There's a lot of flexibility. He could
We're wandering way down the road now. Elliot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the easiest thing to do is at the town meeting, when we give the Finance Committee's report, which is on every article that we review, that the Finance Committee has approved this much, that we spend a thing, but would ask the Board of Selectmen to decide within the budget or as just as a recommendation from the Finance Committee. It doesn't have to be a motion. It can be a part of the Finance Committee's report. That way it would get before the town meeting and they could cogitate all they want on it and say, yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah, matter of fact, Vaughn, it actually can, without a vote, without a motion, you could actually put it in your cover letter to the warrant. You have the freedom to say, and these are the things that the Finance Committee was concerned about.
I have his cover
And
letter already.
without it, I'm sorry if you'd have to edit by Friday, I'm sorry. But it doesn't, you see what I mean? There's a lot of different avenues.
Very short letter.
To transmit this, there's a lot of avenues to transmit information, even down to, hey, go off on your own and talk to the select board if you feel like it.
I can actually just email the select board and I can just ask them.
Because now, you're saying you want this as a note, and now, because now you're going to vote it. And so I had it now, make a note that the Finance Committee has asked the Select Board what amount of this debt could be inside.
That's the motion. That's the motion and the second. So all in favor of that motion?
One more.
Yes, Diane.
Now, is that going to be put in the book,
That would
John?
be in the book, because that's what she's
Okay,
saying. She
'cause
wants it
that's-
noted in the book. So I just
Yeah.
added a couple words at the front that it was a note that we have asked, which means if we vote this, then Vaughn has to communicate to the board that.
So we have a motion and a second.
Got it.
All in favor?
What do we got?
What do we got? Okay.
He's up, right. So we got all that side, and we got all this side.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so it's just us.
Okay.
11-2.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. So.
Truth is, I was going to ask them anyway, so we didn't even need to do all
I'll
that.
second that.
Whatever.
There was a motion on the floor to adjourn.
Motion adjourned, second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none.
We are
adjourned. Thank you very much for everyone to watching.
Oh, before you leave, I know you said it. I just wanted to say, because this will probably be my last Finance Committee meeting, because I'm done this year. I'll serve at town meeting, and I know we adjourned, but I just wanted to say, over the 9 years, and it went by fast, I've had the pleasure of serving with a good number of people over that 9 years, and it's been a pleasure, but I really won't miss it. Thank you very much.